Good evening. This is Sky News. It's 6 o'clock and it's time for the big European grudge match. They've been slugging it out on the sidelines, but tonight they're top of the bill. The middleweight battle for the hearts and minds of Middle England. In one camp, the multilingual master, the champion of the Continental. In the other, the bulldog who wants Britain to break away.
I will challenge Nigel Farage to a public, open debate about whether we should be in or out of the European Union, because that is now the choice facing this country.
Mr Farage, is very much over to you. The ball is in your court.
I nearly choked on my bacon roll when I heard Nick Clegg say he wanted to have a debate.
You're ready to go to take on Clegg on the LBC debate.
I can hardly wait.
Let me be absolutely clear. Leaving the European Union would be economic suicide.
I believe that the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves.
We're no longer asking if Britain will have a referendum. We are asking when Britain will have a referendum.
They all want us trapped inside this European Union. We want to make our own laws in our own country, in our own parliament.
The Liberal Democrats will lead the way as the party of in.
UKIP want out of Europe, whereas the Lib Dems are the party of
in.
The party of
in.
We are unashamedly patriotic in this party.
An ungenerous, backwards-looking politics.
We believe in this country.
Politics of blame has found an acceptable face. It wears a big smile, looks like someone you could have a pint with down the pub.
I got the train the other night. It wasn't until after we got past Grove Park that I could actually hear English being audibly spoken in the carriage. Does that make me feel slightly awkward? Yes.
You're underneath this, you're a Liberal Democrat.
I am indeed, yep.
We are not anti-Europe.
I'm married to a woman who is Spanish. My mother is Dutch.
You know, we don't think Sodom and Gomorrah begins at Calais.
I'm going to start apologising for having people with European passports under the roof of my home. Being in Europe means being in work.
My job is to persuade the great British public that in no other part of the world do we need to be part of a political union in order to go on doing business.
Yep, it's time for the Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg to take on UKIP's Nigel Farage in a live debate on Europe. This is LBC Radio's debate, but here at Sky News, as you may have seen from our campaigns, we believe political debates should be brought to as wide an audience as possible. And thanks to LBC, we're able to bring you the whole event live. We'll have the uninterrupted debate from 7 o'clock. We'll have all the reaction here at the venue from some of the 150 or so British and foreign journalists who are waiting to see how it unfolds. We're also going to take you to Dover, to Brussels, where we're inviting members of the public to come to watch. And we'll track the reaction on social media as well. We caught up with both competitors this morning to make sure they hadn't got cold feet. Nick Clegg gave us a few confident words heading into Whitehall, while Nigel Farage had a bit more time speaking from home.
Morning. Yes, looking forward to it enormously. Thank you. Thank you.
The big myth, put about by three parties, the big banks and a few multinational businesses, is that 3.5 million British jobs would be lost if we weren't governed by the European Commission. That, I think, is absolutely at the heart of this, because they've been saying this to us for 20 years, and of course if you keep saying the same thing over and over and over, it sticks in people's minds. And my job is to persuade the great British public that in no other part of the world do we need to be part of a political union in order to go on doing business, and that actually they sell us far more than we sell them. And we'll go on buying German motor cars regardless.
Nigel Farage there. Nigel Farage and Nick Clegg both standing here very shortly indeed. Nick Ferrari, who is the Indomitable Breakfast host on LBC. He will be here and he will be asking the questions. This is a debate that Nigel Farage says that he has been waiting 20 years for. The gauntlet was thrown down on Nick Ferrari's breakfast show about a month or so ago when the Deputy Prime Minister said, yeah, let's talk about Europe, let's debate Europe ahead of the May elections. And even before that gauntlet had hit the carpeted studio floor, Nigel Farage said, you betcha. As far as Ofcom is concerned, the organisations that governs broadcasting, they feel that UKIP is a leading member ahead of the May elections, and as such, they should have a voice. So, how is it going to go tonight? Well, the man in the hot seat, the one who is going to decide what the questions are and corral the audience, is here, Nick Farage. Tell me what happened when they threw down the gauntlet to start with.
Well, we were very excited by it, and I think it absolutely underscores what you've just said. There are 150 journalists, not just from UK, but from Europe and actually other parts of the world, and this shows the importance of these debates. And there's a very good article, actually, in the Times newspaper this morning that said that this might be the way to incentivise politics, to actually get people engaged again with the sort of things that you do on Sky News and we do on LBC. So, as you rightly said, the gauntlet had hardly hit the carpet, and it was on. And credit, let's say this here and now, credit to both of them. Nick Clegg for doing it, Nigel Farage, I can see why he's doing it. You've just said 20 years, and remember, the public have waited 40 years for this. And it comes from Clegg, so kudos to him and well done to him.
Cheers, jeers, goodness knows what else might happen, because when we saw the 2010 leaders debate, of course, the audience had to sit on their hands, didn't they?
Look, I've watched that, and I've watched the great work that your colleague Adam Bolton did. Fantastic piece of work on Sky News. But I think you're very experienced, Adam's very experienced. It would have been lifted by some applause. Not necessarily cheers and jeers and boos and hisses. This is not a pantomime. It is a serious political debate. But if somebody makes a point that people agree with, it is worthy of applause. But it has to be contained. So this is not going to be Jerry Springer or something like the end of this, but it's going to be a bit up from Question Time, but quite a long way down from Jeremy Kyle.
How are you going to decide who goes first?
A toss of a coin. Toss of a coin. It has been widely reported that we hoped it might be a euro. That seems to be a bump in the road. We'll go for a good old-fashioned pound.
Either way.
Yeah, either way.
It doesn't really matter,
no,
does it?
No.
So there's going to be policies, but also personalities. The bruiser from the boozer and the geography teacher.
Yes. Now, this is what's going to be fascinating. The man in the pub act with a pint, well, actually, it's not an act. I don't think it's the genuine person. How does that actually go against someone who's very strong on detail? And you've interviewed him many times. He does call Clegg LBC. He's very, very competent, and I'm not saying Nigel isn't, but he's also the Deputy Prime Minister, so possibly his level of oratorical skills would be superior. But if you want the populist touch, if you want the snappy line, you'd probably look to Nigel Farage. Remember how he's been in the EU Parliament when he called Herman von Rompuy not even a name in his own household. So it's a great battle.
Yeah, Rumpy Pumpy is
Rumpy
as
Pumpy
well,
is the other
hasn't
one.
he?
I don't know what that means.
I have no idea.
No.
I was rather hoping you would explain it
I'm
to
going
me.
to look it up.
Who do you think might win? Ladbrokes have got Nick
look
Clegg.
at you. I'm not going to answer that, Kate, but I'm not even going to pretend.
OK, I'm going to put it in a different way.
Yes, I thought you might.
Ladbrokes say that they think Clegg is just ahead.
Is that right?
Yep.
That's interesting.
My Twitter followers today was saying Farage by a country mile.
And I think you've just put your finger on it. Literally, it could go either way. If you look at the columns, they've written respective columns in different newspapers this morning. You've got to say that ready to throw the first punch looks like being Nigel Farage. He looks like he's ready up for it. Of course, if Clegg can give it a quick swerve and then come back, then it could go to him. I know you're going to be following it on social media. So are we. You know me well enough. I'm going to dodge it. It could go either way. It's a game of two halves.
What sort of questions do you think might come up?
I've seen them. They're great. I can't share them with you, but they are really fantastic. They speak to the issues that we're worried about in Europe. They speak to immigration. They speak to housing. They speak to financial control. And they also speak to the calibre of the two men as well. Okay. Good stuff coming, I promise you.
OK, we're very much looking forward to it. Why do you think the Labour Party and the Conservatives have ducked it?
Do you know, there was just a moment when I thought Labour might get engaged, and there was a sort of whisper. And I thought, well, what a clever idea, because where would that lead David Cameron? He needs this debate like he needs a hole in the head. He just wants those Euro elections over and done and done. Why have they chosen not to? Well, their argument would probably be it's affording Farage a platform they don't necessarily need, but they are wrong. We all know what's around the corner, OK? There's a general election. Whoever are the 3, 4, 5, 10 main parties, we have now started these TV debates. This is another example with LBC and Sky News doing it. This is what the public want. Journalists have come from around the world. Take a lesson here. You've got to do more of these debates.
Couldn't let you get underway without...
What have you got?
This gift from your old mates at Sky News. This is to wish you luck in your debating. Don't have it before.
I was going to ask you whether you swift to... No, that's so... Because we go back to Sky News.
Yes.
To when it very... I think you were the second employee and I was the third, wasn't I?
Exactly
so. So it goes back a long way.
Exactly so.
That's
But enjoy
sweet.
it afterwards and enjoy the debate as well.
You're so kind.
Don't worry that the eyes of the world are watching you.
No, thank you. I'll give you a kiss and say goodbye now. Bless you, Kate, and thanks to all Sky News. That's lovely. Good luck.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kate.
So we're very much looking forward to that debate. That debate starts at 7 o'clock, but don't go anywhere just yet. We're going to take you to Dover, White Cliffs of Dover. We're going to take you to Brussels as well. We're going to find out what social media thinks. But right now, let's find out what our political editor, Adam Bolton, thinks. What are you expecting, Adam?
Well, I'm expecting the first significant head-to-head two-person debate on television in British politics at election time. We got the three leaders together at the general election. It is a pity, in a sense, that Labour and Conservatives aren't taking part, but on the other hand, it does mean you've got them up against each other in a straightforward duel, and I think that's going to be fascinating viewing. What about the two men? There's not perhaps as much difference in their backgrounds as you might expect. Nick Clegg is 47, Nigel Farage is 49. They're both London public school boys. Mr Farage went to Dulwich College, the alma mater of people like P.G. Woodhouse and Raymond Chandler. On the other hand, Nick Clegg went to Westminster School and was actually a contemporary of the film actress Helena Bonham Carter. Both men, of course, have served as members of the European Parliament, and both are now the leaders of their party. And indeed, those two parties, the Liberal Democrats and the UKIP, UK Independence Party, are now competing in national opinion polls ahead of the general election for third place, both at around about 10%. When it comes to the European elections, many pollsters are now predicting that the UK Independence Party could even come first, ahead of Labour and the Conservatives, moving up from the second place they got 5 years ago. Now, what we're going to be doing here in Westminster is getting reaction to the debate. Labour and Conservatives are keeping their powder dry until they've heard what the two men have got to say, but they'll be joining us afterwards. I've also got here with me an expert panel of top journalists and commentators. They'll be giving us pre-match and post-match analysis. And we are going to have the first instant opinion poll on who did best in the debate. Peter Kellner of YouGov will be joining me as well. So you'll be getting a lot coming in from Westminster as well, Kay.
Absolutely. Very much looking forward to that, Adam. Thank you. Now, social media playing a huge role in this debate as well, of course. My Twitter account has been very busy today with people offering their views, who might win, where the boundaries might be. The answer is there aren't any boundaries at all. But what do you think? Do keep in touch. Let us know. You can tweet us, you can email us, or you can get in touch with Jane Secker. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Kay. Well, it's often very difficult, of course, as you know, to get those in the Westminster Village to disconnect their eyes and their fingers from their social media accounts, especially during events like Prime Minister's Question, and we're expecting that tonight will be no different. We're going to be bringing you all the latest movers and shakers' thoughts on the Sky News social media screen. But it's not just those in the Westminster bubble, it's also about your views at home. What do you think of the two men? Who's winning you over their arguments? Who's messed up, perhaps? What's the gaffe of the night? We want to hear from you, so do get involved. We're monitoring those using the hashtag LBC debate. You can also tweet me directly on Jane Secker Sky, and I'll be telling you how you can also get involved in our exclusive Twitter poll in a moment. Well, helping me cast an eye on social media traffic this evening is Felicity Morse. She's the social media editor at The Independent, and Jim Watson, the political editor at BuzzFeed. Thank you very much both for joining us this evening. Now, as you can see, both parties have already been using Twitter to their own advantage. Nigel Farage there, tweeting, "My live debate with Nick Clegg is upon us. Does he realise what's about to hit him?" I'm sure he does. He's also tweeted, hoping that everyone will be able to listen, watch the LBC debate tonight. And we've also seen some people from UKIP. The atmosphere is building at UKIP. Nigel's being inundated with messages of support, the same from the Lib Dem press office. They're retweeting the fact that Richard Branson has tweeted, warning that to leave the EU would do enormous damage to entrepreneurs in the UK. Richard Branson himself: "Don't let Great Britain become Little Britain," why the UK should stay in the EU. Felicity, briefly, how important do you think social media reaction is going to be this evening?
I think it's going to be incredibly important, especially because everybody's waiting to see what will happen. At the moment, I think it's the man people don't like v the man people don't trust. So I think everybody's wanting to see that be changed, and I think it's going to come through with reaction, and it's going to be, it's going to be people reacting to things. I think everybody's coming with sort of thoughts and
with their own agenda.
Yeah,
perhaps.
with their own agenda, and I think the leaders are going to try and break those sort of ideas down.
And Jim, is this really a taste of what's to come with the election next year?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of the official accounts will be there tweeting out the same old lines, the same things we expect. and pretty much nothing much of interest. The real interesting stuff is going to come from ordinary people. When this hashtag starts trending, click on that, have a look at what people are saying on that, ignore the ones who work in Westminster, and then focus on what the person up in Huddersfield or somewhere like that is saying.
Indeed. Well, as I've been saying, it's not just the politicians and commentators that are interested. What do you think? We're going to be using Twitter to conduct a straw poll of who won the debate. To take part, visit the Sky News Twitter account, which is @SkyNews, and then retweet the image of the party leader that you think has won. It's as simple as that, and we will bring you the results after 8 o'clock. Back to you, Kay.
OK, look forward to that, Jane. Thank you. We're up in the spin room now. This is where the 150 or so journalists will be gathering, not just from the UK, but from around the world as well. There are screens all down this room, and basically they're the people, along with you at home, that the two politicians will have to impress ahead of those May elections. Let me just show you around. This is Ian Dale. He is the drive time presenter on LBC. He's trying to ignore us. He's going to give us a little wave. There you go. We're going to be chatting to him shortly. He's in a break, he says. We don't get breaks, do we? And then we move a little bit further down. If you just want to pan round, David, you can see these are the journalists who are already gathering here. And those are the screens behind that I was talking about. There we go. Ignore Stigable. We'll be talking to him shortly. He is the managing editor of The Sun, of course, and he is also my LBC radio co-host. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us on Sky News. So, who wants to go first? Either Suzanne or go?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I'm really looking forward to this. This is something I think the British people have needed for quite some time. Europe hasn't been at the top of the political agenda, but it should have been, because it affects our lives more than anything else up to a certain point. And, you know, people want to hear the arguments, so I'm really looking forward to what each side has got to say. But, of course, I'm hoping that Nigel will just top Nick.
OK, and Jo, you are Deputy Chief of Staff to Nick Clegg. How has he been feeling today?
Former Deputy Chief of Staff.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes, yeah. Well, I should think he's quite excited about it. I couldn't agree more. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm really glad it's happening and that Nick suggested it. I do think it's time that the British public had an open and transparent debate about Europe, and that it was given the importance that it deserves in the public mind.
OK. What do you think the main issues are going to be? Is it as simple as a hokey-cokey in-out debate?
I think there might be a few shades of subtlety within that, but, you know, the Mori poll for The Economist today...
You're not telling us that your leader's subtle, are you?
Well, Nigel can be. I mean, he's a very bright man, you know, this kind of like happy man in the pub image. Yes, that's definitely part of his character, but he can be much more intrinsically intelligent than that, if you like, and I think sometimes the press portray him in a particular light that's... we might see a little bit more of the other Nigel today. But, you know, as I was saying, the Mori poll today, immigration's one of the top issues. We can't control immigration without discussing the EU, so I think that's certainly something that's going to be coming to the fore.
What about Nick? What sort of character are we going to see from Nick?
Well, I think, you know, it's quite well known that he doesn't avoid exposure like this. He does his weekly radio programme on LBC, so I think he'll enjoy it. He enjoys this sort of thing. And I agree that immigration will be a key debate topic. I also think the economy and what being inside Europe means for British jobs and the British economy will be something I think Nick will be quite keen to push.
I've got to ask you, are you one of those fruitcakes that we hear a lot about?
Do I look like a fruitcake?
You don't, but how did you feel about being called one?
Well, you know, people are going to call me all sorts of things. I'm a politician. I've had far worse on the streets. We take the flak. We just have to put up with it. You develop a pretty thick skin in this job. But certainly, since I joined UKIP, I have not met fruitcakes. All the people I work with are fantastic. Really great team of people that's been surrounding Nigel. Although he's not done any sort of formal prep for this, I think all he's done has been checking his facts, checking his statistics, checking that everything's bang up to date.
OK, and how do you think that Nick will feel about the two main leaders, the other leaders not taking part?
Well, I should think he's probably a bit disappointed about it, actually. I do think leaders and public servants have a duty to be accountable and answer and put their views forward. So to avoid something like this, I think is a bit remiss and a mistake, because they miss out on an opportunity to speak to a huge number of people and put their case forward. It's a bit complacent, really, that they don't think they have to.
Okay, ladies, I'm so sorry we're going to have to leave it there, but perhaps you'll talk to us again a bit later on. Jo and Suzanne, thank you both very much indeed. You can see that the spin room is starting to fill up now. As I said, there's going to be about 150 or so journalists from not only the UK and Europe, but around the world as well. We're going to try, not sure if it's going to work, but we're going to try to do a simulcast on Sky News and on LBC Radio. Stay tuned for that. Hello again, you're watching Sky News. About 35 minutes or so to go now until the debate on Europe begins. In one corner, Nick Clegg. In the other, Nigel Farage. No holds barred. The ringmaster will be Nick Ferrari from LBC. You'll be able to listen to it on LBC and watch it on Sky News. We're going to attempt a simulcast, as I was saying just before the break, on LBC shortly. But before we do that, I thought I would just make sure we don't knock the journalist over with his cup of tea and his biscuits. I thought we would walk down through the spin room, give you a feel of how it's starting to build up a little bit now. Sort of questions that potentially might be asked. What do you want to know? News at sky.com 84501. Tweet me at Kay Burley. What about these two people? Let's find out what they want to know. Anne Treneman, who is the sketch writer at The Times, parliamentary sketch writer at The Times, I should say, shouldn't I? And my
sketch writer.
Okay, and Roland Rudd, my own mate, chairman for Business for Europe, is the latest hat that you're wearing. Thank you for joining us live on Sky News. What are you hoping for? What sort of killer questions might there be?
Well, I'm hoping that Nick's going to get this across, that to be out, there is no vision of what out is. We're very clear what Nigel Farage wants, which is to leave the European Union, but we're none the wiser about what happens to Britain if that was to happen. And I think he will expose that. I think at the same time expose the myth that somehow the European Union has as much to lose with us leaving as we do, because if you look at this, the simple statistics are their trade with us is worth about 2.5% of the EU GDP. Our trade with them is worth 14% of our GDP. So we have much more to lose. So I think there'll be, those are sort of key points to get across. And of course, the jobs. I mean, he will talk about jobs. And it's not a question of saying, this amount of jobs will definitely be lost if we leave the EU. But it's completely fair to talk about things like the 750,000 people who are in the car manufacturing industry and rely on their jobs from that. And the three largest car manufacturers have made it very clear that if we were to leave the European Union, leave the single market, they stay.
Anne.
Well, I'm hoping that it'll be a little more fun than statistics and everything, and I think that will be the key. I think Farage is a great showman. I mean, he's got that marvellous cartoony...
Is he a good orator? Is he as good as Nick Clegg?
He's
proved himself to be a good orator.
He's not a good orator, no, but he's a good showman. He's very sort of... he can be quite funny. Hopefully there'll be a few jokes tonight. And I'm sure...
You just see them arriving, actually, posing as they get here.
Posing is the right word.
A little bit nervous, I think.
Oh, I think both of them are nervous. Both of them have let it be known that they aren't preparing for tonight. And I assume...
And you're buying into that, Anna?
I've seen them spend virtually all day sort of having questions barked at them and them sort of saying something charming back. That's the other thing that's kind of interesting, is both of them can be quite charming. Nick Clegg, at his best, can be ultra charming. And it'll be interesting to see how that works. I think he'll be quite combative with Farage, though.
Almost out of time. I want to chat to you again later, but who's going to win?
I think Nick will take... I'm slightly biased, but I do think that having asked for this, got it, he must win it, and I think he will.
I really don't know. I think Nick Ferrari is going to win. This is what I'm thinking. But I really don't know. It really depends on who keeps their cool, I think.
Okay, well, we'll see, won't we, very shortly. I know you're going to monitor it on the screens behind you. Chat to you again later. For now, thanks very much. Let's head this way again, should we, Dave, and just point out where we're going to be doing our simulcast very shortly with Ian. But, right now, let me bring in not only Brussels, where Robert Nisbet is standing by for us, but also Anushka Astana, who is standing by for us at the White Cliffs of Dover. Should we go to ladies first? Anushka, what are they hoping for there?
Hi Kay, we're at St Margaret's Bay here near Dover, and it's actually the closest place in Britain to mainland Europe. So close that our mobile phones are welcoming us to France. You can see it from the coastline, and there's a real sense here of Britain's relationship with the EU. We've gathered together 4 local residents, a beer consultant, a retired policeman, a PhD student and a gardener who is Polish, and they've got a real mix of views. So let's just see what they are now. Phil, who do you want to win tonight?
Definitely not Nigel.
Peter, Nigel or Nick?
Nigel Farage.
SK, who's likely to convince you?
Definitely Nick Clegg, because he has the content.
And Anthony, Europe in or out?
in with reforms.
So a real mix of views, but will the Europhile Nick Clegg or the Eurosceptic Nigel Farage be able to sway them?
OK, thank you. These are the screens that people are going to be using tonight to monitor the debate. There will be a countdown clock here as well. I'm sure Robert Nisbet, who is standing by in Brussels, is very much equally looking forward to it. Robert, what do you expect from where you are?
Indeed, Kay. Well, we've commandeered this rather smart apartment, which is about 1 kilometre away from the main European institutions. And we've got 4 students who are drawn from a smorgasbord of European countries. We have Hungary represented, Sweden, Germany, and there's an American here as well, all to give their insight. They live and they study here in Brussels. And I think from canvassing opinion just before we all sat down here, I think it's fair to say that people knew a little bit more about Mr. Farage than they did about Nick Clegg, and that's because Nigel Farage cast quite a large shadow over the scene here in Brussels. He's very famous as a combative and often angry-sounding MEP, so they know him well. They're looking forward to see how he debates. But we're going to be asking fundamental questions here. How does the rest of Europe view the UK inside the EU? Would they be happy if the UK left? We'll be answering all of those questions a little bit later on.
OK, Robert, thank you. Smorgasbord, love that, don't you? So we are expecting that debate in around about half an hour's time. Do stay tuned to Sky News and LBC. And again, you're watching Sky News. We are gearing up for the LBC Leaders Debate on Europe. Nigel Farage and Nick Clegg are the 2 men that will be at the microphone very shortly indeed. Just want to show you 2 gentlemen who are trying to stay out of the way, but they are slightly anxious at the moment. Ashley Tabor and also Stephen Myron. They are from Global, and they are keeping a watchful eye, making sure everything is going as it should today. This is the moment I was telling you about. Not sure if it's going to work. Ian Dale has got faith.
Hi.
Hi. Stig Abel has got faith.
It's
managing
6:34 here
editor.
on LBC. Kay Burley joins us. She's just asked. We're actually live on Sky News as we speak. Stig Abel is here, her partner in crime on Sunday mornings on LBC as well. Kay, you've been here all afternoon doing bits for Sky News. What do you make of the atmosphere compared to maybe the 2010 debates?
It's absolutely sensational. I know that there'll be there will be jeering, and there will be sneering, and there will be cheering as well.
That's just from you.
And that's just from me, and maybe a little bit from you as well. But I'm really very excited about it. There's a lot of tension in the air. It's almost palpable, isn't it? We saw the 2 leaders arrive just a short time ago, and they look a little bit nervous.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. I think it's very interesting the battle between the consummate Westminster politician, Nick Clegg, and the man who pretends to be an anti-politician, Nigel Farage. And he won't have his tabs, he won't have his half pint of mild to prove what a non-politician he is. So I'll be fascinated to see whether we see a slightly more formal, a slightly more polished Nigel Farage, and whether that works well for him or not.
And the other thing, of course, is that things come across differently on radio and television. Kay, you and I probably know about the Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960. I'm sure we weren't old enough to actually watch it, I hasten to add. But of course, people listening on the radio thought Nixon had won, but on television it was Kennedy, and that was crucial in that election. So I wonder if
a little bit of perspiration, wasn't there?
There is on my top lip at the moment, to be frank. Now, what are you expecting from Nigel Farage? You will have interviewed him many times on Sky News.
Sure.
Both of these leaders can get a bit tetchy from time to time, can't they? Particularly in interviews. Do you think that will be the case in this debate?
I think if they're tetchy, they're done for. I think they need to be everybody's best mate. I think Nigel Farage will be that bruiser from the boozer, as I've been describing him today, and he does seem to have a lot of public support. Nick Clegg has fallen away from that Clegg mania of 2010, so I think he's got a mountain to climb. What do you think?
I think there's a challenge for Nigel Farage. I was talking to someone from YouGov who's saying Nigel Farage, even people who don't like him, think he occasionally talks sense. And that's the real market I think he's going to go for today. People say, I'd never vote UKIP, and I think he's a bit of a buffoon. If he says something interesting on immigration, say, that most ordinary people would agree with, I think that's where he's going to really score.
I've just seen Danny Alexander
Well, I was
arrive.
just wondering if he might like to come over.
Do you think he wants to chat to us?
Danny?
Danny Alexander, you're live on the radio and on Sky. Come and join us.
Never turn an
Have a
opportunity
seat.
down, surely.
Have a seat. This was the first man that referred to the rumble in the broadcasting jungle. Yeah.
The hustle for Brussels, didn't you, Danny?
Yeah, I think I did say the hustle for Brussels. Could be the tussle for Brussels. It's the battle for Britain. You can call it what you like. I'm not Don King, so you can do that for yourself.
Last time Danny and I were on the radio on election night, we both made a fatal mistake of promising to run down Whitehall naked if the Liberal Democrats won 59 seats or fewer. Neither of us have delivered on that promise, have we?
No, and I think that's a promise that's going to stay broken. I think for the benefit of the whole British population, that promise.
Oh, I don't know. I'd pay good money for that.
Would you really? Well, there you are.
The Sun will sponsor that. Have you been with Nick Clegg this afternoon? How's he been preparing for this evening?
I haven't been with him this afternoon. I was in the House of Commons finishing the debate on the welfare cap that we've introduced, but he hasn't had that much time for preparation, but he has spent quite a lot of time. You know, I think the key thing here is that there's a very important argument to be had about Britain's place in Europe. The Liberal Democrats are the party of in, we're the party that is most committed to keeping Britain in the European Union. Obviously, Nigel Farage has a very strong position himself, and it's a really important opportunity with European elections coming up for people to hear both sides of the argument, get some facts on the table.
Isn't it a sign of desperation, though, that Nick Clegg actually challenged Nigel Farage to this debate? Because normally he would only want to debate the two main party leaders. It's a sign that you're going to come fifth in the European elections, isn't it?
Not at all. Look, I mean, the fact that it has attracted this attention, that it has got this interest going in one of the most important arguments, I think shows that it was the right call.
Okay, I have to go and leave you to it. Can I ask you a quick question? Do you wish it was you rather than Nick Clegg on the stage?
No, I'd much rather it was Nick Clegg.
Okay, but you do want to be leader, don't you?
Nick Clegg, I hope, will be leader for a very long time. You can ask me many other questions about what might happen in the 2020s, and I'll give you the same answer.
Okay, I'm going to creep away. I'm going to leave you gentlemen to it, and I'll speak to you later.
Enjoy the evening. Thank you very much. Steve, you're going to stay with us. Danny, I don't know how much time you've got.
It worked. How cool is that? So that was us live on LBC and live on Sky News at the same time. Now about 7:22, we will be heading down shortly to hear both from Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage. We'll see their personalities most certainly, but also want to know about their policies. Our political editor Adam Bolton has been monitoring events at Westminster throughout for us. Adam, how do you see it going?
Well, it's not quite as frantic up here as it is down there. And with me are some senior political journalists, the political journalist and commentator Isabel Oakeshott, who has a book about David Cameron coming out soon. Also here, the chief foreign affairs commentator for the Financial Times, Gideon Rachman, and the political editor of the New Statesman, Raphael Baer. Welcome to you all. Let's cut to the chase. Is it a mistake that David Cameron and Ed Miliband aren't there today?
I don't think it's a mistake for either of them, actually. I'm sure they're very wise to keep away from it. I think that the long-term winner out of this might actually be Nick Clegg. I know that's not a popular view, but I think we might be reminded of just why he was so popular after he did it last time.
What do you reckon?
Well, I think actually it's quite possible that they can both win, because if you think about it, the people who Nigel Farage really speaks to, who really hate the European Union, anti-immigration, quite reactionary, that's not the pool of voters that Nick Clegg is fishing in. And Nick Clegg, you know, Europhile, pro-European people, that's not the pool of voters that Nigel Farage is fishing in. So ultimately, if they can both raise their profile, cut through it, you know, Farage can cut through as a mainstream party leader, Nick Clegg can, as Isabel said, remind everyone that he's actually quite a good political performer. It could be quite win-win, actually.
I mean, Stig Abel of The Sun there just saying even people who don't like Nigel Farage thinks he talks sense. Do you think that's true?
I think there are probably people who don't engage much with politics and hear what Nigel Farage says and think, you know, that has a ring of truth about it. I think anyone who's probably engaged enough to really listen and has taken a negative view of Farage will probably be quite hostile and won't necessarily think, well, I hate him most of the time, but there's a sort of a glimmer of truth there. But again, I think ultimately the people that Nick Clegg is talking to will be people who genuinely think Britain should be a member of the European Union and actually want to hear someone say it for a change. And so actually I think Clegg's, again, I agree with Isabel, has quite a strong position here.
Gideon, we saw people in Brussels looking in there. Do you think this is going to feature at all on kind of Angela Merkel's briefing notes tomorrow, what happened in this debate?
Well, I think broadly the Germans and others, the people in Brussels, are following the British debate on Europe quite closely, because it's kind of struck them in the last year that, you know, Britain might actually leave the European Union. And that would be very big news for the EU. We've been members for 40 years. It would be a blow to the European Union. And I think, apart from a few really hardline federalists who think, well, actually, maybe the whole thing would work better if the UK left, most people don't want us out. And they're kind of watching with a bit of horror and fascination at this debate going on in Britain.
Who do you anti-post? Who do you tip to come out on top?
You know, I think Farage will probably do a little bit better, because I think he has a more populist touch, and I think Clegg has some difficult ground to defend. For example, on immigration, whatever one thinks about it, I think that the whole question of free movement of people probably works better for Farage than for Clegg.
What do you think?
Well, I think that it's right that Nigel Farage has the more popular position, but people are sort of expecting him to really cut through as the kind of blokey man in the pub act. But has that act been sustained ever for longer than about 5 or 10 minutes? I mean, this is a long debate. After a while, on the detail, you could see Farage slightly crumble. And if Nick Clegg can sort of flush out that slightly tetchy, brittle side of Nigel Farage that we've seen recently in some press conferences, where he doesn't like being pushed on the detail and he doesn't like being challenged repeatedly, I'm not sure. I think it'll be very close.
I mean, that is the point, isn't it? Because there's the argument about Nigel Farage is the man you see is the man in the pub, that's the man you get. Is he really as straightforward as that?
Well, actually, I think he is. Having been in a pub with Nigel Farage, that is the man. But the other thing is that Clegg is actually very personable as well. So the strange thing about this debate is it is between two people who most of us would actually probably have a reasonably good time with if we spent an evening in a pub with.
Yeah, I mean, I actually knew them both in Brussels when they were both MEPs, and it's true, they were two of the people you'd be quite pleased if they approached you, and that wasn't true of most MEPs. They were fun to talk to. They're both quite personable, and I'm afraid, Raphael, that Farage won't have a problem sustaining a debate on Europe for an hour. He's been living this stuff for a decade.
Well, but Clegg goes into with the sort of lower expectations. I mean, this is the man who was sort of despised, burnt in effigy within sort of 6 months of joining the coalition. But you forget that, as Isabel said, you know, he performed very well in those debates in the 2010 general election. And also, ultimately, you know, he's been doing that LBC programme for a year. He's never once dropped the ball. He's actually become quite a consummate political performer. So, as I say, I think up against Farage, if he sort of reaches over Farage's head and just talks about the issues that he cares about and comes across as someone who actually believes in what he's saying, he could claw some of that back.
Well, we shall see. Don't forget, we're going to have the first post-debate poll here from YouGov shortly after 8 o'clock.
OK, Adam, thank you. So really livening up now here in the spin room. Danny Alexander, who I was chatting to, Chief Secretary of the Treasury on LBC, is there. This is the managing editor of LBC, just keeping an eye on events. Very stressful time for him, as you can imagine, chatting to one of his presenters, Stig Abel. And this again is Ian Dale and his team with the, in fact, just sitting down is the political editor of LBC as well. Tension certainly building. What is happening on the White Cliffs of Dover? Anushka Astana is standing by for us. Anushka, take it away.
Yeah, we're at St Margaret's Bay here, the nearest place in England to mainland Europe. Some people are even tweeting that we're actually in France. Well, the residents here would tell you that is not the case. Let's ask their opinions. Anthony, you came here from Poland 9 years ago. You're a gardener and you think in Europe but with reform.
Yeah, certainly there's nothing good about the bureaucracy in Europe, and I believe that UK could do a lot of positive things.
So you think the Prime Minister could force a change?
Maybe not this one.
OK, not this Prime Minister. Eske, you're studying nearby. You used to be Eurosceptic. Not anymore?
Indeed. I grew up in the Netherlands, where there's a lot of Euroscepticism, and I just took it over because that's what our politicians told us. So I do understand the sentiment in the UK that the UKIP is now playing on. However, then I moved to Belgium and I actually started learning what the EU is about. And then I couldn't but change my mind because I realised the EU is not some scary machine imposing views.
So you'll be supporting Nick tonight?
Of course, definitely.
Now, Peter, you're a retired policeman. You've been here for 8 years.
Yes.
And you think local issues are making you back Nigel tonight?
Yes, because Nigel Farage talks on immigration, which, quite frankly, is a big concern in the area of Dover.
Yeah, so you think that people around here will be voting UKIP, maybe?
I think they will, yes.
OK. And Phil, you describe yourself as a European mongrel. Tell me why.
I think, yeah, my mum's Italian, my grandmother's Swiss, grew up abroad. My other half, she's Dutch. My work is over there, my life's over there. as much as it here is in the UK.
So you'll be very much agreeing with Nick tonight and perhaps not agreeing with Peter. Hopefully we'll be having some disagreement tonight while we watch the debate. Let's see later whether any of their views change.
OK, Anushka, thank you. The journalists are starting to gather now into their little packs. As you can see, Ben Brogan is there from the Daily Telegraph. I'm not sure he wants to talk to us just at the moment. They'll be debating who's going to win. Benedict Pavio from TV24, one of the European journalists here as well. I heard her just ask some of their colleagues, who do you think is going to win? That's the question here. Let's take you to Brussels, where we're standing by with Robert Nisbet. Who do you think is going to win, Robert?
Very interesting question. Certainly Nigel Farage is very well known in this town, and of course this is the epicenter of the European project, the capital of Europe. There'll be a number of people watching, I think, this debate very closely, as they have been following the British political debate over Europe and Britain's place in it. I'm going to keep the food analogies going. Let's have some tapas of opinions from some Europeans who we have in here, drawn from Sweden, from Hungary, also from Germany, and we have an American in here as well. Let's start off with Balázs Kos. You're Hungarian, you're studying here in Brussels. Do you think it would matter if Britain left the EU?
I think it would matter enormously, because I think the relationship between the UK and the European Union, it's a two-way street, in the sense that both economic and politically, the UK needs the European Union just as much as the EU needs the United Kingdom. So they are mutually reinforcing one another, and I think I'll just leave it at that for the moment. So
it would be a shame for both Britain and for the EU if Britain were to leave?
It would definitely be a shame, both economically and politically as well, because they are relying on each other. Okay,
Rasmus Furman, you're German and Swedish, so let me ask your opinion on this as well. I mean, it's not just Britain that's having this debate, is it? It's important to notice that the 28 member states are all having something similar to this.
Of course, in Sweden we have the far-right party, the Swedish Democrats. In Germany we have the Alternative for Germany. They're all kind of dragging on the ends of the EU and Germany's membership and Sweden's membership in the EU. And I guess that if Great Britain would exit the European Union, that would cause a ripple effect that could somehow sort of spur on this exiting the European Union in the northern countries, and that would create a mass, basically something that Germany doesn't want economically.
Well, let's cross over to Germany. Sitting next to you on the sofa, Helena Kegel. Now, Helena, you studied in Britain, so you've seen both sides of this. In Germany, they're worried about Britain potentially leaving?
Definitely, because in a way, what would Europe be without Britain? What would Germany be without Britain? So in a way, it's always been the three, France, Germany, and Britain. So if one drops out, that's a bit weird, isn't it?
Right, okay. So, you know, it's important for balance within the whole
Definitely.
European project. So finally, Lauren, you're American. You've just come here from Washington, D.C., as I did myself. Did you wander into this maelstrom and think, what is going on in Britain? Britain's obviously part of Europe.
A little bit, yes. I was very confused when I heard that people in Britain were so concerned about their membership in the European Union. It really took me by surprise. And so hearing these debates and hearing both sides and their arguments it's interesting. A little worrisome, but interesting to hear both sides.
So worrisome and interesting, Kay. We're going to be sitting down and watching the debate along with the rest of you, and I can guarantee there will be a number of televisions around Brussels that are going to be focusing on this debate this evening.
I'm sure that's true, Robert. For now, thanks very much indeed. This is why we're here, in or out of the EU debate, with those two men getting very busy here in the spin room now. But I have, I think, spotted a Labour activist. Going to try and track them down, and we'll see you in just a moment. Stay tuned. In or out of the EU, the big debate starts on LBC and Sky in around about 6 minutes' time. Want to tell you about how important Twitter is, though. Mark Hughes from The Telegraph has just tweeted this picture of Nigel Farage having a pint before he comes to the debate. We're reliably informed he'll be going for another pint afterwards. Will he need it or not? Jane Seckham monitoring social media for us. Jane?
Time will tell, Kay, but as you say, with only a few minutes to go, momentum's really building on social media. We're monitoring Twitter here on the Sky News social media screen, and we're especially monitoring people using the hashtag LBC debate. You can also let me know what you think directly at Jane Secker Sky. There's also an exclusive Sky News poll that you can take part in, and we'll give you some more details of that in a moment. With me again, Felicity Morse, the social media editor at The Independent, and Jim Waterson, the political editor of BuzzFeed, the social news and entertainment website. Kay just talked about Mark Hughes's picture there, this exclusive picture of Nigel Farage ahead of tonight's debate. He looked very relaxed. Has that been the big tweet so far, do you think?
Well, not so much. I think there's been like a lot of bile at the moment, but it's good to see that Nigel Farage is getting his money's worth of the budget. So he can get 300 in, that's then his free pint.
There wasn't much taken out the top of the pint, so maybe he'd only drunk the penny.
Perhaps it was just a posed picture, Jane.
Well, had he drunk the whole pint? That's what we want to know before he goes into this debate. Today it's fantastic. Who's winning the Twitter race so far, do you think, Jim?
Oh, well, I think UKIP are charging in with their typical force. They're all going in demanding blood, their supporters, whereas the Lib Dems, in sort of typical Lib Dem fashion, are trying to sort of put subtle points about the economic case for staying in the EU. So you've sort of got the two sides there. I think it's going to be the same with the two leaders tonight. Farage will do an emotional thing, Clegg can do the factual argument, and their supporters are doing the same on Twitter.
Talking of people on Twitter, Martin Day here, he has apparently put £11,000 for Nigel to batter Nick, he says. I hope so, because I've wagered £11,000. He's going to win £8,000. If he does just that, he's certainly put his money where his mouth is. Brandon Davey, nothing will harm the campaign to keep Britain in the European Union more than Nick Clegg leading it. Lizzie here saying, sometimes I think people on the continent must think British people very peculiar for being so anti-EU. Does Twitter, Felicity, really reflect the electorate? We know that UKIP does tend to perhaps appeal to traditionally conservative voters, possibly older, possibly more rural. Are these the people that we're going to be hearing from tonight, or is it much more the urban metropolitan elite?
No, but they are quite socially engaged, as anybody who feels that they're an underdog cause that needs a voice are. They are much more socially engaged than the Lib Dems, especially, and you're seeing it again tonight. And they're very vocal and, I mean, some might say aggressive. I mean, it wasn't quite clear whether that he's got the money is on to batter Nick, whether it was even in the debate or in the pub afterwards. But
yeah, and on that theme, Nigel talks the most sense and probably wouldn't go back on his policies. Although I see faults, I'm pro-EU, will need persuading to go the other way.
Well, this is the thing. The people who are pro-EU still don't like Nick Clegg, quite a lot of them. So when you're looking at something like this, which is about personalities, and social media is just completely about personalities, then you'll have that divide.
OK, we're going to leave it there. We're going to be conducting Twitter to conduct a straw poll of who won the debate tonight. Visit the Sky News Twitter account at Sky News. Simply retweet the image of the party leader that you think's won, and we'll bring you the results after 8 o'clock. Kay.
Thanks a lot, Jane. We just heard Nick Ferrari warming up the audience downstairs. You would have thought on his money he could get somebody else to do it for him. Let's bring in quickly Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun and Emma Burnell, who is a Labour activist. We've not found very many of you sort around these parts. How do you think it's going to go?
I think it's going to be fascinating. It will either be an absolutely incredibly interesting debate, or we'll have an hour where we don't hear very much of anything. But I'm guessing with these two characters it'll be the former. Tom?
Well, look, both men have already won. I'm one of those in the camp that the fact we're all here, look at all of us, talking about nothing but the Lib Dems and UKIP, that doesn't happen too often. They both win, no matter what our poll says at 10 past 8, half past 8 tonight.
You've got a poll, haven't you?
We have got a poll. We're going to reveal who won. The only YouGov, the only opinion poll being done for the whole debate by YouGov, incredibly quick, live, so we've got people voting and watching at the same time. So we'll have the results of who our sample of 1,001 think of one by 8:30. But my feeling is, I think Farage has got a bit more to lose. Nick Clegg is coming to this with nothing. He's absolutely zero, rock bottom. He's the challenger. If he loses, then he goes down as the loser everyone always had him as. Nigel Farage, he's on a crystal wave. He's going to take the European elections. If he doesn't win, then he could be in some trouble.
Where's your mate? Where's the boss?
The boss has decided that this is a debate between people who are not going to be the next Prime Minister, and that's not for him. So, but I have to say that tonight...
So does he not think Europe is important?
Europe is very important, but I think that I'm hoping that Nick Clegg will make the pro-Europe case very well. And even as a Labour activist with not normally much good to say about the Lib Dems, I look forward to him doing so, and I wish him luck on it.
Have they called it wrong, the Tories and Labour Party?
Possibly, possibly not. I think the risks for Cameron and Miliband coming here and getting trounced by either Clegg or Farage were far too big. They'll lose a little bit of support and perhaps a few plaudits for not turning up. The idea, by the way, that neither man are going to be watching this is completely untrue. They're watching you and I almost certainly right now, and that much I can promise you, if they haven't got LBC Radio on, of course.
Okay.
But
you know, they're probably doing both, I would have thought. We were simulcast earlier on. I can see the clocks on the screen behind, so we're going to leave you to watch it. Thank you very much indeed. So let me just show you what's going to happen here. You can see there's a clock, a countdown, 30 seconds. This is for all of the journalists in the room, and it's gone a little bit quieter now. Everybody is waiting. There you go. The clock has started. This is the debate that Nigel Farage says that he has been waiting 20 years for. Nick Clegg said, yeah, all right then, bring it on. Let's talk about Europe. Let's debate whether it should be in or out ahead of the May elections. The other two main parties are not here tonight, but you can bet your bottom dollar they will be watching in 3 seconds' time. Here we go.
Good evening. I'm Nick Ferrari, and welcome to the LBC Leaders Debate. In the next hour, history will be made. First and live on LBC Radio, where we're leading Britain's conversation every day. You've waited decades for this leaders' debate on Britain's future relationship with Europe, and here it is. Nick Clegg is Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Democrats and says his is the party of in. Nigel Farage is the leader of the UK Independence Party and is equally unequivocal. He wants out. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage. The rules are as straightforward as the debate. After a brief opening statement, each will face a series of questions from a carefully selected and evenly balanced audience. Neither has the slightest clue of the questions coming their way. Now, to decide who goes first, what better way than to flip a coin, a good old English pound. Deputy Prime Minister, as you threw down the challenge, and you are higher in the alphabet, I'm hoping I catch it. I'd ask you to call it, please. Heads. So the Deputy Prime Minister says heads, and as we can see, it has gone to tails. Nigel Farage, you have the choice. You can either go first or second for your first minute.
No, I will ask Nick to open the batting.
Nick Clegg to open the batting. Your minute starts now.
This debate is about you, and it's really simple, because it's about your job. Or if not your job, the job of someone else that you know. And it's about making sure that the sacrifices that you have made to fix our economy aren't wasted. Because, make no mistake, if we cut ourselves off from Europe, from the countries that we trade with more than anyone else, then our hard-won economic recovery will simply be thrown away. It's also about who we are. A Britain that leads in the world by standing tall in our own European backyard. A Britain prepared to work with other countries on the things we can't possibly sort out on our own. So don't let UKIP or anyone else put all of that at risk. We're better off in Europe, richer, stronger, safer. And that's why I will fight to keep us in, for the sake of jobs, for the sake of our clout in the world, for the sake of Britain.
Mr. Clegg, thank you. Appreciation for Mr. Clegg, if you would. Thank you. Nigel. Thank you very much. Nigel Farage, your minute starts now.
Well, we're having this debate. At last, it's taken a very long time. Just imagine, though, we weren't debating whether we should stay or leave. Just imagine we were debating whether we should join the European Union. And I put it to you that what we ought to do is vote yes in a referendum to join a club that will cost us £55 million a day as a membership fee, that will give us thousands of new laws over which our own parliament and you, the electorate, can make no difference. It'll mean an open border unconditionally to 485 million people from across the whole of Europe, many of them from very poor countries, and they can come here and work and live and settle and bring their families and do as they wish. And it would also mean that we would have to cut our links with other parts of the world, the Commonwealth, the Anglosphere, and many other parts of the world, because we'd lose the ability to make our own trade deals. I know the result of that referendum. You wouldn't join it. The debate here today is between a tired status quo defending a crumbling European Union that frankly isn't working anymore, and a fresh approach which says, let's be friendly with Europe, let's trade with Europe, but not be governed by their institutions.
And your appreciation for Mr. Farage, please. So, we move to the first question. So that you understand, again, each of the leaders gets a minute approximately to respond. I choose who goes first, and then we debate it between us. So let's find, please, Deborah Tioradini. Deborah, where are you, and your question, if you would? Go ahead.
Why won't politicians trust the British public by giving us a referendum on our membership of the EU now?
And let's turn to Nigel Farage.
Because they're worried about the result. They think you might vote differently to their view. And, you know, Nick is here, and I'm very pleased that Nick laid down the gauntlet for this debate, but Nick is not here just representing the Liberal Democrats. He wants to stay a member of the European Union, but of course that's David Cameron's position and it's Ed Miliband's position. And what happens is, from time to time, they offer us a referendum. You know, they do it cynically, funny enough, at election time. And they say, vote for us, we'll give you a referendum, and then do their absolute best not to. 5 years ago, Mr Cameron was offering us a cast-iron guarantee of a referendum. Nick Clegg himself, you know, the last European elections and general elections, said it's time for a real debate. Let's have a referendum. Well, Nick, we're having this debate, and it's a good thing that we are, but I agree with Deborah's sentiment. Why don't we trust the British people to make their minds up on what I think is the most important constitutional question we faced in this country for 300 years? Are we to be a self-governing nation or not? And I agree with you. I would like this referendum to take place before the next general election.
And let's turn to Nick Clegg.
I also agree with you, Deborah, that when powers which rightly belong to you and to the British people are passed to the European Union, it's happened many times in the past with the rule changes that come along from time to time, the way that the rules are rewritten within the European Union, that should never again happen over the heads of the British people. Then the British people, the consent of the British people should be asked by way of a referendum. That's what I've always believed. That's always been my position. I've never wavered in that position. That's why the last time the rules changed, something called the Lisbon Treaty, I said there should be a referendum. I've gone further than that, actually, now in government. We've actually legislated. It's the first time anyone's ever done that. We've passed into law a legal guarantee for you, Deborah, the next time you're asked to give up powers to Europe, the next time the rules change, the next time something else is asked of the United Kingdom within Europe, it's not going to be the decision of Parliament or politicians or the government of the day, it's going to be your decision in a referendum.
But Nick, the rules change every week. Every single European directive, every single new regulation, every single court judgment, frankly, that comes out of Luxembourg, every single time a new EU law is passed, yet another small chunk, albeit small, and it's incremental, yet another small chunk of our ability to govern our country goes to the institutions of Brussels. And I think the real frustration is that all of you keep using this form of words when there's the next significant change. In the space of this coalition government, we've transferred control of the City of London, we've allowed the EU's foreign policy to become bigger and stronger. And surely, what the lady's really saying is, why don't you trust her? Because they've actually given up believing anything that you say. And if you say the next time there's a big change there'll be a referendum, and Mr Cameron says it, and Mr Miliband says it, no one believes you're actually going to deliver. And maybe that's the role of UKIP.
Well,
maybe the reason we're having this debate is that UKIP are forcing you onto that turf.
No, I accept, and that's why I said to Deborah, we've done something which no government has ever done before, which is you need that guarantee, not just from what different party leaders or politicians say, but you need that in law. Now, you've got that guarantee in law. That's never happened before. And I think Nigel says, let's have a referendum next Tuesday, next Wednesday, next Thursday, every time there's a sort of, a decision taken somewhere else in the European Union. It's really important to remember this is a decision which would have a huge effect, which would have massive consequences on our country for generations to come, for decades to come. So the idea that you do that sort of flippantly, I think you do it when new powers are being, if you like, asked of the United Kingdom, and those new powers are going to be transferred to the European Union. That's my view. I think if you were to do it now, given how the European Union is in a real state of change and flux at the moment, you've seen all these problems in the Eurozone, they're sort of changing their arrangements. I don't think we really know what we're having a referendum on. So yes, let's have a referendum. Let's have that legally guaranteed in law at the time when new things are asked of the United Kingdom.
Mr Clegg, I wonder if I can read you the words from a very prominent politician back in 2008. It's time to give the British people a real referendum on Britain's membership of the European Union. And there we are, there's a very fresh-faced, carefree politician there in that poster. Why are we still waiting?
Well, if everyone can read the small print, which I suspect you can't, what it said, no, I don't mean the small print, I mean in the leaflet. What it said was, at the time we were debating a new change in the rules, which is exactly what I was just referring to with Deborah. At the time in 2008, there was a new treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. This is the treaty where, as Nigel Farage rightly points out, the Conservative Party changed radically their attitude towards it. I had exactly the same view in 2008, 2009, 2010, namely, when the rules change, when new things are asked of you, powers which rightly belong to you, then it is your decision in a referendum. That's why I said in that leaflet, and indeed in countless debates like this, that's when the referendum should take place, and now we've gone further. We've guaranteed that right to have that referendum in law.
But the trouble is, you're defining transfer of powers in terms of treaties. There is a possibility that actually there won't be any treaty change. Because in fact what's happened since your beloved euro has gone into a tailspin is without using treaties, they've managed with the Eurozone countries to acquire yet more power at the centre. Sure. And surely, you know, there is a very urgent need to have this. This isn't flippant. And after all, and everybody in this room over the age of 55, and I bet there are many in this room who voted as my parents did, yes, but they voted yes to a common market. So frankly, this is unfinished business for the over 55s, and there are 35 million of us who've never been given the chance to have a say.
Look, I accept that if you think there should be a referendum, you know, come whatever, you want a referendum next Wednesday, my position, of course, is not for you. If you think there should never be a referendum, there are some people who don't think we should have a referendum, then my position is not for you. If you believe, and I think many people believe, that you have referenda in our country, in our parliamentary democracy, when there's an important question to answer, when new powers are being transferred from our country to the European Union, that's when it shouldn't be done in Parliament, shouldn't be done by any government, it should be done by you in a referendum, and I, and the government of which I am part, has guaranteed that in law for the first time ever.
Let's get to... Indeed, if you hear something you like, that's what you do. Nigel Farage, you have paid tribute to the fact that Nick Clegg is prepared to debate you.
Yes.
What does it say about the courage of the other two party leaders? They're not here.
Well, Mr Cameron said he was too busy running the country. Well, he's certainly busy running from something, isn't he? And Mr Miliband did his best not to give any response at all. I mean, the one thing I will say is that UKIP are certainly united on the European question, and the Lib Dems are very strongly united on the EU question. The Tory party have a sort of historic fault line, which is very visible to all. You've got something like 80 backbenchers who now rebel regularly on the European question, whether it's... Remember, 2 years ago, they were being three-line whipped not to give us a referendum. So there's a big rebellion there. But I think actually, within the Labour movement, things are not quite as serene as they may appear on the outside. And I think also the Labour Party has a big split. So they'd rather not talk about it, and they'd rather conduct the European elections, not even discussing this question.
But by taking the stance you have briefly, Nigel Farage, are you destroying UKIP's best chance of a referendum?
No, I think one of the things that will happen over the course of these European elections and perhaps beyond is that commentators in this country will wake up to what is currently the greatest myth in British politics. The myth is that UKIP take Tory votes, therefore will damage the Tory party, and that'll lead to a Miliband government. The truth of it is, only 1 in 3 UKIP voters is a former Conservative. We pick up the bulk of our votes from old Labour and from non-voters getting back into politics.
Nigel Farage, thank you. Let's move to our next question. John Connolly. Mr Connolly, you're a builder, and I think your question pertains to that, sir.
Yeah, you talk about economic recovery and jobs. Our borders are wide open to hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans coming and taking low-paid work. Now, it's a brilliant thing that the tax threshold has been risen to £10,500 for people in low-paid work.
All right, so thank you. Just to repeat, what Mr Connolly is saying is there are hundreds of thousands of Eastern Europeans coming here. They take low-paid jobs. The tax threshold is not enough. Where is the benefit? We must start with you first, Mr Clegg.
Clearly, the point that you're referring to, John, is incredibly important. And it's a very emotive issue, this, about people coming in and out of our country. And indeed, of course, many Brits, about 1.5 million Brits who live elsewhere in the European Union. We've got to get the rules right. That's why the government This government has significantly tightened up the rules. That's why, for instance, I want to restore exit checks at our border so we count people out as well as we count them in. People can't just come here to claim benefits, for instance. Yes, come if you want to try and work. Come if you're really going to make a contribution, if you're going to play by the rules. But you can't simply receive benefits, no questions asked the first day. That's why we've changed the rules. But let's remember, of all the new jobs created over the last year or two, 9 out of 10 of those new jobs have gone to British workers. Let's remember that actually people who come to our country, they create wealth, they pay taxes, they help sustain our NHS. If we were simply to pull up our drawbridge, we would destroy jobs for everybody in this country, and that is not something I'm prepared to see happen.
All right, we'll come to you in a second. Thank you. Nigel Farage.
Well, I love it. Nick says he wants to get the rules right. Let me tell you what the rules are, Nick. The rules are we're members of a European Union which has total free movement of goods, capital, services and people. And that may have been okay when we were in with countries, you know, like the Netherlands and France and Germany with roughly similar living standards and hospitals and primary schools. What we've done is we've let in countries that were trapped behind the Iron Curtain for years. Romania, for example, where the minimum wage is 1/9 of what it is in this country. And we have a total open door, unconditionally, to 485 million people, and they are the rules of the European Union, and you cannot be allowed to get away with saying you want to get the rules right by putting in these weasel words about benefits. This gentleman who's asked the question, John, he's not talking about benefits, he's talking about the fact that for hundreds of thousands of people working in trades like the building industry,
5 seconds, Mr.
we've had a massive oversupply of labour, and you've seen your wages go down over the last 10 years as the cost of living has gone up, and that is not fair on working people in this country.
Mr. Clegg actively shaking his head. Mr. Clegg.
I understand, John, as I say. This is an issue which creates great anxiety. People are unsettled by the whole immigration. I understand that. But we have to have this debate on the basis of facts. And what you've just heard from Nigel Farage is simply not true. I've got here a leaflet from Nigel Farage. Can I just finish the point? This is a leaflet that Nigel Farage's party distributed in the recent Eastleigh by-election. You may remember it. It says here that 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians may come to this country. There aren't even 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians living in Romania and Bulgaria. It is simply not true. So, you know, let's have this debate, John, but let's have it based on fact. Let me give you one more fact. 1 out of 7 of every company, new company created in this country are created by people who come here, pay their taxes, play by the rules. If we pulled up the drawbridge overnight, as Nigel Farage implies, our NHS would collapse overnight. Yes, let's make sure that we bear down on unscrupulous employers who, for instance, don't pay the minimum wage. That's why this government has quadrupled the penalties we're going to impose upon unscrupulous employers. Let's bear down on the loopholes. Let's make sure people do play by the rules. But let's not scare people by claiming things that are not true, which would have the consequence of making us poorer and putting more people out of work. That surely cannot be right.
You didn't answer the question, did you? You didn't answer the question. You tried to do trickery with the 29 million, saying there aren't 29. You know why? Because 2 million have left already, and they've gone to Italy and to Spain. Nick, you didn't answer the basic question. I'm not claiming 29 million people have the right to come to Britain. Yes, you do. I'm claiming 485 million people have the total, unconditional right to come to this country if they want to. And I think you're quite right. You're quite right. The fact is, if we're members of the European Union, we have the complete free flow of people. Are you denying that?
Yes, it is not unqualified.
You are denying
it is not the case that anyone can move to this country and simply claim benefits, simply
Didn't mention benefits. You keep doing benefits. We're talking about the free movement of people and the ability in John's industry to get a job.
Let the Deputy Prime Minister speak.
Once again, I think what you're owed are the facts. Not simply a lot of, opinion. You're owed the facts.
No opinion here, it's fact.
Since 2004, about 2 million people from elsewhere in the European Union have come to our country. About half of them have returned. At the same time, there are 1.5 million Brits who live elsewhere in the European Union. So, really the question is I think Nigel Farage needs to provide you with an answer. If we do pull the drawbridge up, we simply say, no one else allowed, put up that sign at the cliffs of Dover, what happens to the 1.5 million Brits who are elsewhere? What happens to the businesses? What happens to the British jobs that are dependent on people coming to this country? And don't just believe me. Listen to the people who employ thousands upon thousands of British citizens in this country who say that if we turn into a closed country rather than an open one, we will be poorer and we will have higher unemployment. And I'm not prepared to see anyone lose their job on the altar of Nigel Farage's anti-European dogma.
All right, gentlemen, just pause for a moment. Thank you. This is the LBC Leaders Debate, Nick Clegg versus Nigel Farage on the European Union. You're listening on LBC, watching on lbc.co.uk. Take part in the reaction using the hashtag #LBCdebate. And the LBC listeners have been emailing in their questions. Deputy Prime Minister, perhaps I could put this to you from LBC listener Carol Lauderdale. Is it right to have child benefit paid for children not even living in this country?
No, I think that's exactly one of the things that don't make any sense, and one of the many reasons why the government, of which I'm Deputy Prime Minister, why we've changed the rules. So, for instance, no one could just turn up here and claim benefits, no strings attached, no questions asked. We're the first government ever to make sure that you've got to wait at least 3 months before you claim any benefits, that if you've been here for 6 months from elsewhere in the European Union and you haven't found a job, you can't receive job seekers allowance. Housing benefit is no longer going to be provided to people from elsewhere in the European Union. If people come here from elsewhere in the European Union, they can't support themselves. They're not looking for work. They're not looking for work. If they are out on the streets, begging on our streets, and they shouldn't be here, we send them back home. So there are limits, and there are things we can do, but where Nigel Farage and I disagree is that I think that if we simply pull up the drawbridge and refuse to allow people to come here, play by the rule, pay their taxes, create jobs, it'll be bad for Britain. Never mind anyone else, it'll be bad for our country
it's
itself.
all well and good saying it'd be bad for Britain and putting up drawbridges. What you're not doing with this question, as you didn't with the previous one, is actually to answer it. Because the truth of it is, if you come into this country and take a job, let's say on minimum wage, you qualify on day one for a full range of in-work benefits, including child benefit for your kids living back in Bucharest,
how many people from,
whatever it is.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Clegg.
Nigel Farage, how many people from elsewhere in the European Union, in terms of the total number of benefits claimed, do you think, what is the proportion of the benefits claimed by people from elsewhere in the European Union? Tell me what
At the moment, mercifully small.
Well, how small?
Well, I'll tell you. There are only 45,000 children living in parts of Eastern Europe that are currently claiming child benefits. But I would answer that's 45,000 too many. Surely the benefits system is for citizens of this country
Sure. And let's hear the
who've worked and paid in for years.
Briefly. Mr. Clegg.
The answer is, in terms of all benefits claimed, the benefits claimed by people from elsewhere in Europe is 2% of the total. Now, Nigel Farage says 2% is too much. It is 2%. In other words, it is a very, very small proportion of the total. Again, the facts show that people who come here from elsewhere in the European Union to work and pay their taxes pay much more into our coffers than they take out in benefits. In fact, if you look at the 10 years from 2001 to 2011, they contributed close to £22 billion. That helps fund our schools, helps fund our hospitals, helps fund our police, helps fund our military.
I'm
we mustn't make our country poorer because of the determination by UKIP and others to turn our back on the rest of the world.
I'm sorry, Nick.
A sentence, if you would, Mr.
What that
Farage.
study did was to say who's in work and what tax are they paying. What it did not do was price in the in-work benefits, which is housing benefit, child benefit, tax credits, and child tax credits. And the point is, actually, there's a study by Migration Watch that says from 95 to 2011, in total, immigration into Britain cost us 140 billion sterling.
All right, let's move on to another question. Thank you for that. Varsha Nusimlu, who's a marketing executive. Varsha.
My question is, if the free movement of EU citizens was restricted, would this create any skill shortages in the UK?
And it's Nigel Farage's turn for the first minute. Mr. Farage.
No, because I believe what we ought to be doing is operating a system of work permits. Work permits in terms of what are the shortages that we may have and what are the skills that other people may want to bring to us. But I think it's complete madness to say we have a total open door to nearly 500 million people and any of them can come. Not only do we not have quantity control, we don't actually have any quality control either. So what we're now doing is we're saying to people from India and we're saying to people from New Zealand who've got skills to bring to this country that we want, no, you can't come because we have to leave room for the now 4,000 people a week that are coming to settle in this country from southern and eastern Europe. And that strikes me as being a crazy immigration policy. Let's actually not think of it purely in European terms. Let's think of it globally. Let's be happy to give people work permits, which gives them the right to come and work in this country. They must bring some insurance to cover their health affairs. And if after a period of time they've been here and they haven't committed any crimes and they want to become citizens of this country, then they'd be good, acceptable people to have. And at the moment, we're not choosing on the basis of quality.
Mr. Farage, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Clegg.
Barsha, my view on this is that, of course, we should always do more to improve skills. That's why I'm incredibly proud of the fact that over the last 4 years we've expanded apprenticeships, for instance, for young British people, to give them the skills to find work on a scale that we haven't seen in a generation or two. Of course, we should prioritise giving skills training to British youngsters. But the idea that we help them then find jobs by pulling the drawbridge up, simply turning our backs on you, simply doesn't make it. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, a German company, a household company, Siemens, announced they're going to create 1,000 jobs in Hull, in the Humber area, in a new offshore wind centre. 1,000 jobs for people in actually a part of the country that's desperately crying out for extra jobs. Guess what the chief executive of that company said? If we were not within the European Union, Siemens would make it quite difficult for me to continue to invest in UK factories. There you have it. They wouldn't create the jobs for which the skills are necessary. That is why I don't understand, in pursuing the withdrawal from the European Union, we would make our country poorer if we did what UKIP said.
The jobs would go. Nigel Farage.
Well,
they would go. The jobs would go.
Foreign direct investment is an important point. It is a key point. And I so well remember, Nick, you and all your gang, all the big corporates, all telling us 12 years ago that if we didn't join the euro, remember that? If we didn't join the euro, all investment into Britain would cease, the City of London would disappear, and all I can say is thank God we didn't listen to you. Otherwise, we'd have been in one hell of a mess. And despite the fact we ignored you then, foreign direct investment is coming into the United Kingdom at a greater level than it is to all the rest of the countries of the European Union combined. And fascinatingly, when Ernst & Young did a survey in North America and in Asia, where the big investments are coming from, 2/3 of both of those investors said, actually, if the UK was outside the European Union and we didn't have the expensive regulatory regime, they may well invest even more money.
But I personally will, and I suggest many people would probably feel in the same position, you're going to listen to what investors actually say about the decisions that they make about investing in our country than politicians like Nigel Farage or myself. Just the other day, I was up in Sunderland. Nissan, a major employer, they employ over 7,000 people in the northeast. They export 80% of the cars they produce in Sunderland to elsewhere in Europe. They could not have been clearer. If we did what UKIP did, they wouldn't invest in Sunderland. There wouldn't be those 7,000 jobs. If you don't believe Nissan, if you don't believe Siemens, listen to what the chief executive of Ford in Europe said. He said, don't discuss leaving a trading partner where 50% of your exports go. That would be devastating for the UK economy.
Mr. Clegg,
I believe what they say, that they would not invest in this country if we were not part of what is the world's largest economy. Why would we pull ourselves out of the world's largest economy
Clegg,
when 50% of our exports go to the rest of Europe?
You mentioned Ford. You are aware that they closed a plant in Southampton last year so they could move the work to Turkey. How does that square?
Well, of course companies move operations from one country to the other, but they will exit from the United Kingdom, leaving thousands and thousands of families distressed in their wake because they will not have a breadwinner in those families, able to pay their bills, able to look after their families because the investment has gone, the jobs have gone. And that's what they're all saying. Just last week, we had an announcement from Hitachi, a big household name again, and they said they're going to make our country the global hub, the global headquarters of their rail business. And they said they're doing that because we're part of the European Union.
Mr. Clegg, we must. Let's get Nigel Farage back into this. I want to give you you're going to respond. Nigel Farage, this is for you.
Let me answer the Ford question if I can.
Very quickly, if you would.
Because actually that happened with money given to Ford by the European Investment Bank, including such that we actually ourselves as taxpayers subsidised Ford to close down in Southampton and with European money moved to Poland. And this car market debate, we sell 1 million cars a year, Nick. to the European Union. All right? It's an important marketplace for it. Declining, of course, because they're in real economic trouble. But they sell us 1.8 million cars a year, and cars of much higher quality and price. The point about trade is the German car industry needs the British market far more than British manufactured cars need the European market.
Mr.
And
Farage,
that's called the world of business.
Mr. Farage,
that is how it works.
Mr. Farage, respond to this, this email from LBC listener Max Lake. If we came out of the EU, this would affect the job prospects of young people. He's right, isn't it?
I think
young people watching.
No, I think he is. I think Max is right because outside the European Union, we would be able to get rid of some of the ridiculous excesses that we currently have. You see, it's all well and good. It's all well and good to have employment legislation that is designed for giant multinational companies. But if that legislation applies to small firms, and bear in mind 60% of people that work in the private sector in Britain work for companies with 10 employees or less. I spoke to a business yesterday that was about to set up. They approached the Forum for Private Business to ask for advice on employment law. They were sent a document that is 350 pages long. If we could reduce that burden of employment, health and safety and work, and environmental law, we could create
how many jobs?
Many jobs indeed. And that is really a major problem that the British economy currently has.
Thank you.
I think the answer that UKIP and other people who want to withdraw ourselves from what is the world's largest economy need to answer is how many jobs are they prepared to sacrifice? It's been reliably estimated that over 3 million jobs are linked to our position within the European Union, which is, by the way, a marketplace of 500 million shoppers, 500 million consumers who buy our goods and services that we sell to them. And unlike what you just heard, 50%, half of what we sell goes to the rest of Europe. Actually, the rest of Europe, only 8% of what they sell goes to us. So we benefit enormously from this. Now, if it's not 3 million, because I guess 3 million jobs, of course, wouldn't disappear overnight, is it 2 million? Is it 1 million? Is it 500,000? My view is we shouldn't be sacrificing a single job just to fulfill this dogmatic view that we should turn our backs on the rest of the world and on Europe. 3 million jobs is 3 million pay packets, is millions of families in this country being able to pay their bills, which they otherwise wouldn't. And that's why this is, at the end of the day, about jobs.
I have to say, there is, Nigel Farage, one moment, there is some research that will question that 3 million figure, I have to say, Deputy Prime Minister. Nigel Farage.
Nick, when you answer a question like that, by saying 3 million jobs are at risk, you show that, like virtually everybody at Westminster, you've never run your own company, you've never had a proper job in the real world, you are part of this political bubble that picked up a piece of research that was produced 10 years ago by a guy who himself now says all he said was the jobs are linked to trade in Europe, they're not at risk.
This is what I said.
And all of you, you all do it. Tories do it, Labour do it, the big banks do it, the multinationals do it, and the truth is this. We sell, in terms of manufactured products, about £100 billion worth of goods every year to Europe. It's about 40% of our overseas sales. It is quite important. No doubt it's important. Declining every year, but important. But the point is this. They sell us roughly £150 billion worth of goods every single year. The United Kingdom, this is extraordinary, the United Kingdom is now the Eurozone's biggest export market in the world. They sell us more than they sell to Japan, or to China, or to the United States of America. And trade is not something created by politicians and bureaucrats. No. Trade is created by consumers who make a decision. I like this product, right. I'm prepared to pay its price. I spent 20 years in the private sector. I can tell you something, in private business, the customer is king. And when it comes to renegotiating a trade agreement with Europe, with no threat to any jobs, apart, of course, from the commissioners and the British MEPs who'd all be turfed out on their ear, and that's no bad thing. When it comes to a renegotiation of that deal, we actually hold the whip hand. That is the real world of economics. That is how it works.
Gentlemen, let's bring in another, Mr. Clegg, if you will. Let me bring in another. It is related to this, so you will have your opportunity. Jamila Long, who is in banking. Jamila.
How are we supposed to compete with the likes of China or America if we're not part of a larger trading group?
So how would we compete with the likes of China and America if we're not part of a bigger trading bloc? Neatly, Mr. Clegg, it falls to you to go first.
I agree with you, Jamila. Look, the world is changing dramatically. You know this, Jamila, from your experience in finance. We all know this. It's not the 1950s. We can't turn the clock back. We've got these new powers on the world stage, Brazil, China, India, and we get more clout by operating through the world's largest economy. That's what the European Union is, despite its faults, despite the fact that it needs to be reformed. It is the world's largest economy. And we get clout by actually representing 500 million people when we measure up to the Chinese and the Americans and others in trade negotiations. This is the fundamental flaw of UKIP's vision. Just imagine what would happen. So we pull out of the European Union. We're no longer part of that the world's largest economy. We no longer have the clout of being part of that economic superpower. And we, as a country of 60 million people, are, according to UKIP, supposed to be able to cut the same deal with the giants of America and China as we can with the clout of representing 500 million consumers. It simply doesn't add up. We get more clout rather than less by being part of this big European economic superpower.
Mr. Clegg, thank you. Nigel Farage.
Well, once again, Nick, you just show you don't really understand the worlds of commerce and trade. Do you know, when the World Trade Organization meets to discuss global trade, the British representatives are shown the door and asked to leave. No. The world's 6th largest trading nation, the world's 8th largest manufacturing nation, is not allowed to be present in the room.
It's not true.
Because we're members of a European Union, so we have to be represented by a Dutch bureaucrat whose name no one knows and who nobody can vote for. A quite extraordinary state of affairs. We are banned, forbidden from making our own trade deals, you know, with countries like India or Canada or Australia or New Zealand. People who would, at the drop of a hat, sign trade deals with us, we are prevented from doing so. And you know, the reason is, people like Nick don't think Britain's good enough. We're just not good enough. We must give away control of all of these things to somebody else who'll do it for us. We're too small to survive. Iceland has 320,000 people. And in March last year, they signed a free trade agreement with China. If it's good enough for Iceland to do it, I'm damn certain the British, with 64 million, could do even better.
Mr. Farage,
Can I respond to that?
In a sentence,
Can I respond to that? Because unlike Nigel Farage, I actually, before I went into politics, was involved in these trade negotiations. It is simply not true, what you've just heard. Of course it is right that the European Union should measure up as a bloc with the clout of 500 million consumers when you negotiate with the Chinese and the Americans and the Russians, as I did in a previous job. By the way, I keep hearing what Nigel Farage is part. He and I were actually elected as Euro MPs on the same day in 2009. I left the European Parliament after 5 years. He still remains the Euro politician. But I think it is important that we remember that we gain clout by being part of the world's largest economic superpower. And the idea that we would first have to, if we did what UKIP said, first have to renegotiate with 27 other countries in the rest of Europe, and then negotiate with the 50 countries through which we have trade agreements because of our membership of the European Union. So that's 77 countries that a future government would have to renegotiate trade agreements with just to get some of the trade access back that we've lost. I tell you, a government in the future would do nothing for the next 20 years.
Not unless we get a government that believes in Britain, believes in the British people, and says we can make our own arrangements all over the world that suit us, and we don't have to do it.
I believe in jobs in this country.
European
to suggest that believing in jobs in this country.
We've got to have a global future for Britain, not one tied, shackled inside a European Union that is showing itself to be out of date and failing in every measure.
Mr. Farage, I wonder if I can show you some literature that's going to be sent out as part of your campaign for the forthcoming European election. The EU costs the UK £55 million a day, and this is the leaflet that I will be going out later. Where do you get that figure from?
Well, that is just, I mean, to be fair, Nick, that is just our contribution. I mean, that is the beginning of the cost.
You don't say that here.
That is the beginning. No. If you really add it all up, the true cost of membership of the European Union is many, many times that. No. Because what we found...
What about the rebates?
What we found... Well, if I give you £20...
Yes.
You know, and you give me £10 back, I'm not better off, am I? So we give them gross £55 million a day. Yes, they give us money back, but they only give us money back to be spent on ways that they choose, not the ways that we choose.
But the £55 million is misleading, is it not, Mr. Farage?
No, it is absolutely factual. That is our contribution. Of
course it's misleading.
As I said at the start of this programme, our membership fee of the club is £55 million a day.
But again, our total I have to put it to you, you exclude rebates, you exclude fund... I have to put it for a third time.
I've excluded the loss of our fishing. I've excluded the massive cost, the environmental cost frankly, of building wind turbines and damaging manufacturing industry. No, that figure is a very, very low figure. The true cost of EU membership is many times that.
May I make two observations? Just like this leaflet saying that 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians are going to turn up on your doorstep. And there aren't even 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians there. This is once again a claim that simply is not true. If you actually count the rebate, if you actually count what British farmers, for instance, receive in the Common Agricultural Policy, it's less than half that figure. And if you then consider how we benefit from the jobs, from the trade that we get from being part of the world's largest economy, actually, reliable estimates show that it's worth about up to £3,300 per household. But the question for Nigel Farage is, if he cares so much about British money, why is it when this government negotiated a cut, which he said was not possible, a cut in the EU budget, saving 30 billion British pounds, why was it that the UK Independence Party MEPs didn't even bother to vote for it? So if you actually have a place in Europe where you can bat for Britain, why is it that UK MEPs again and again don't stand up for Britain? That's the bit I simply don't understand.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that the Prime Minister, your partner, comes back from Brussels and says, I've struck a great deal. It's a victory for Britain. And I hope that British MEPs will support this. This victory for Britain meant that whilst the EU's overall budget didn't increase as much as expected, Britain's contributions would rise. If that's a victory in Europe, I'd hate to see what a defeat looks like.
Let's move to another question. Clive Hyman. Mr. Hyman, you're a property investment consultant. Mr. Hyman.
Yeah. Concerns control of our own borders. What do you say to the future victims of criminals whom we cannot deport because of our involvement with Europe, with the EU and the Human Rights Act?
All right. What would you say to future victims of crime who we might not be able to deport because of the Human Rights Act? It falls to you for the opening minute, Nigel Farage.
Well, if I was a member of the Liberal Democrat, Labour or Conservative parties that had allowed this legislation to come onto the British statute book, then what I ought to be doing is I ought to be saying I am very sorry. Because the one thing... There are lots of things, by the way, we can learn from Europe, and we are learning some of them. The food's getting better here, and that's great. But one thing, well, it's true. I mean, one thing that we cannot learn from the political union centred in Brussels is about a criminal justice system and the concepts of liberty and freedom. Because, since Magna Carta and the evolution and development of common law, we have had the fairest and best judicial system in the world. And I'm afraid that what the Human Rights Act has done is it's thrown all of this up in the air, and we finish up with a ridiculous situation where we can't deport an Italian mafia boss back to Italy because under his human rights, the jails there aren't up to an acceptable standard. It's time we got back to the principle of liberty and freedom and forgot about European human rights.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. Nick Clegg.
Clive, do you remember the man Hussein Osman, who wore a backpack with a bomb in it, went to Shepherd's Bush tube station, he wanted to blow up lots of people. Thankfully, the backpack didn't go off, the bomb didn't go off, he fled to Italy. He was brought back here, and he now is in jail for 40 years. Do you remember that teacher, Jeremy Forrest, a couple of years ago, who basically took that young girl to France? Do you remember? And he was brought back within days, and he's now in jail for 5.5 years. I just mentioned those two examples because I thought you might remember them. There are actually hundreds of other examples. They were all brought back to face British justice and are now in British prisons because we have European Union rules, which we wouldn't have if we did what Nigel Farage and UKIP wanted, the European arrest warrant, which allows us to take murderers, rapists, paedophiles and other people who want to do us harm and bring them back here to face British justice. If we pulled out of that, which is what Nigel Farage wants, we wouldn't have got Hussein Osman back, he wouldn't be in prison now, and neither would Jeremy Forrest. Right. Actually, by cooperating with other European countries, since criminals cross borders, we must cross borders too to make our streets safe.
Mr. Clegg, thank you. A response to that, 2 words, Abu Qatada. It took 12 years to get him out of the country.
It has nothing to do with the European Union. We did eventually deport him to join. It's the European Convention of Human Rights, which was actually drafted, by the way, after the last war by British lawyers. It's incorporated into British law. It is not the European Union. European Union member states are signatories to it, but it is simply wrong to claim that somehow our streets would be safer if we robbed. And look, again, don't believe my word for it or Nigel Farage's. One of the most senior police officers in this country, Sir Hugh Ord, the head of the Association of Chief Police Officers, said the European arrest warrant is, in his words, an essential weapon in the fight against organised crime. How on earth is it possible for UKIP to claim it is somehow patriotic to make our streets less safe?
Right. Well,
how on earth is it possible that you can claim that somehow you're standing up for Britain if you would not actually extradite and bring back hundreds of people to face British justice?
This really gets to the heart. This really gets to the heart, doesn't it, of the differences between us. And by the way, I don't agree with Nick.
Nick, I've heard that before somewhere.
Nick, we signed our first extradition treaty in this country in 1174, 850 years ago. We currently have extradition treaties with 92 different countries all over the world. Yes, we have to cooperate on cross-border crime. We do it through extradition treaties, and we do it through organisations like Interpol, which we've been working in since 1923. All right? I, of course, want us to have sensible extradition laws, not just with the EU, but all over the world. The European arrest warrant is totally unnecessary. And can I say that for someone like Andrew Symeou from North London to be dragged off without the production of any prima facie evidence, to be left to rot in a Greek hellhole for over a year without his rights of habeas corpus, I think is an abomination. And how you can call yourself a liberal, how you can call yourself a liberal and to support the destruction of all the great principles of British liberty by signing up to European law, I do not know.
All right,
again, let's just leave the rhetoric aside for a minute and let's stick to the facts. Since just 2009, so just over the last few years, 149 murderers have been extradited to or from the United Kingdom because of the European arrest warrant. 120 paedophiles who've done untold damage to innocent children have been extradited to and from the United Kingdom because of the European arrest warrant. And the police tell us it is an essential weapon in their job in keeping us safe. I believe the police more than I believe Nigel Farage. Let me give you one more example of how important it is to... Do you remember back in 2001 there were those plane spotters, the British and Dutch plane spotters? I chuckle now, but it wasn't funny then. They got caught up in the Greek legal system. They ended up in Greek jail. They had no idea what was being told to them. They had no idea what charges were being brought against them. They had no legal assistance. The European Union has now passed new rules, new laws, which means that if any of you go on holiday elsewhere in the European Union and you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, you'll get help with interpretation, you'll get legal help, you'll get assistance. Guess what UKIP did? They voted against all of those measures. Another example of the European Union keeping us safe and protecting our rights.
And if you get arrested in Spain, Nigel Farage, if you get arrested in Spain, Nick, you get arrested in Spain for something you haven't done, you may be left up to 18 months in prison without even facing a charge. We have a system of common law in this country. We've had it for 800 years.
Why did you vote against measures to help British tourists?
It is based on the presumption of innocence before guilt. It is based on habeas corpus and common law. We must defend the principles of liberty, freedom and justice in this country.
We should defend the rights of British citizens. Why did you not vote?
I have not voted.
Mr. Clegg, I'm moderating this debate. Thank you.
I have not
Would you like
voted.
to respond to a question that was put twice?
I've been in the European Parliament now 15 years. They're getting a bit cheesed off of me over there, I've got to tell you. And I have not voted in 15 years for one single piece of legislation that has added to the power base of the European Commission in Brussels.
Even when it means British tourists who get caught up on the wrong side of the law, went on holiday, who need translation, they need help, they need lawyers, they need assistance. Why is it that UKIP dogma is so strong now, you won't even help British tourists when they're on the wrong side of the law, on holiday elsewhere?
Nick, I'll tell you what the dogma is. The dogma is, I believe the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves, not the European Commission.
Okay, let's move on. I think it's a situation here I don't agree with Nick. While we're on people's rights, Nigel Farage, a clarification would be useful. What is your position on same-sex marriage, which comes into effect this Saturday. A statement was put out by your press office, which was subsequently withdrawn. Do you support it, yes or no?
Not all the while we are signed up to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and where we have the risk that our established church and possibly other faith communities could ultimately, under discrimination laws, be forced to conduct services that they find anathema. If we get rid of the ECHR and it doesn't have the dominant place over our society, we'll look at it again.
Nick Clegg?
Of course I support it. I was the first party leader who came out to support it, because I think when two individuals, regardless of their gender, love each other and want to show commitment towards each other, we should recognise that in law. And it really, I just find it extraordinary that UKIP's anti-European is so great they won't actually provide loving couples in Britain with the right to marry, as they will be able to under British law from this weekend. And do you know what, for me, it is just unalloyed great news that love and commitment is now going to be recognised in marriage across the whole of the country, regardless of your gender. I think it's a wonderful step forward.
All right. We move on. We move on to Christopher King. We move on to Christopher King, who is an IT consultant. Mr. King.
Hello. Why does Great Britain always adhere so strictly to EU laws when other countries seem to cherry-pick which laws they're going to comply with?
Mr. King, thank you. A nice booming voice as well. Nick Clegg, it falls to you first. Your minute.
Actually, we're roughly middle of the pack. There are some other European countries, Christopher, that are better at kind of, abiding by the rules. There's some that are worse. Look, you need, don't you, in a big marketplace like this, where I don't know what your business is, Christopher, but lots of people, as you know, are in businesses in this country where they export to the rest of the European Union. You need some basic rules. It actually helps businesses not to have 28 different rules when you are selling your products to different parts of the European Union. That's why you need to have those rules, to make sure that selling to 500 million consumers on our European doorstep, in this largest economy in the world, is done in a way where people don't fiddle the rules. That's why you have a court, that's why you have rules, that's why they, generally speaking, should, of course, be obeyed. And it's exactly the same, of course, in Britain, too. And look, you'll hear from Nigel Farage say, 75% of our laws. No, actually, the House of Commons has shown that roughly 7% of all new laws are related to the European Union. But they do need to be there, that 7%, in order to make sure that you, or indeed anybody else who's exporting into the rest of the European Union, can do so without fear that the rules are somehow going to work against you.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Nigel Farage.
Oh dear, oh dear.
You've used some seconds up. I'd hurry up if I were you.
7%. What are you on about? We had one of your friends from Brussels, Commissioner Viviane Reding, in London the other week, saying we must all sign up to the United States of Europe and we must recognise the importance of Brussels because, after all, it makes 70% of our laws. Even Gordon Brown said over half our laws are made in Brussels. In Germany, the former president conducted a review and concluded that 84% of their federal laws were conducted in Brussels, and you put this pretence out to people, many in this room are running businesses, who know that all the regulations that affect their business are made in Brussels. We obey the rules, sir, because we believe in the Anglo-Saxon rule of law. It's our culture. Actually, most of the rest of Northern Europe obey the rules too, but in the south, they have a completely different attitude, which just goes to show what a tragedy it is that the Mediterranean was signed up to Nick's beloved euro and that tens of millions of people have now been forced into poverty. I want a Europe where we trade together, cooperate together, but a Europe of sovereign, free states, not a political union based in Brussels, run by unelected bureaucrats.
Nigel Farage, where do you get the 75% of laws figure from?
Well, that's the estimate that we've made, and we've asked people.
Okay, but
we've asked people to counter it.
I think it's fair to say, where do you get it from?
If I went with the German figure, I'd have gone higher.
Okay,
yes. The German figure is 84%.
The German
Viviane
would
Reding
say
says
he was
70%.
misquoted. I have to say
Our
that. Go
estimate
ahead,
is
Mr.
75%.
Farage.
I mean, whichever way it is, Nick, whichever way it is, the one thing I thought everybody was agreed on was that one of the reasons we're having this debate, and that Nick challenged me to this debate, is that the European question, whether you agree with it or not, is of fundamental importance. And I've not met anybody serious who said that less than half of our laws were now made in Brussels.
Well, can I tell you someone who is serious? It's the House of Commons Library, and I suspect the House of Commons Library is going to know better than Nigel Farage, or indeed the German president, or anybody else, how many laws in the House of Commons, which is where laws are transposed onto the statute book, how many of them are generated here in Britain, how many of them are generated in the European Union. Their estimate is 7%, not 75%. What we've heard this evening on jobs, on immigration, on investment and now on EU laws again and again and again are the wrong facts. Now, let's disagree, fine, but I really do think that we owe it to you, we owe it to everybody to make sure that these debates on a very important issue is at least based on facts. And the House of Commons Library has been unambiguous, has said that it is 7%, not 75%, and I believe them.
Mr. Clegg, we must move on. This is the LBC Leaders' Debate. Nick Clegg versus Nigel Farage on the European Union. You're listening on LBC, watching on lbc.co.uk. You can take part in the reaction using #LBC Debate. To another email question from LBC listener Beth Porter. You talk about trust. My husband's a fireman. You want me to trust you over Europe. How can I believe your plausibility and integrity when, Nigel Farage, you've put your wife on your payroll, Nick Clegg, you lied about tuition fees? It falls to Nick Clegg to go first.
Well, of course I accept that trust is a rare commodity in politics these days. It's one of the reasons why, in the earlier discussion we had about the referendum, it's now been taken out of the hands of politicians like Nigel Farage and myself. It's now in law that there is this guarantee that there should be a referendum. But at the end of the day, it's not really what this politician or that politician says, or this political party or that political party is. Do you believe in your gut that in this world where there are so many things that we simply can't do on our own anymore. We can't go after criminals who cross borders without working with others. We can't deal with climate change without working with others. And it makes sense for us to have the clout of being in the world's largest economy. Doesn't it make sense to keep those jobs, to retain that clout, and to catch those criminals, rather than put all of that at risk?
We've moved a little way perhaps from individual matters, Mr. Clegg, but I note your answer, thank you. There's also, speaking to your, what did you say, integrity, I think, and plausibility. You're paying your wife.
Well, you know, I do actually lead a group in the European Parliament and a national political party in this country. I never publicly said I wouldn't, no. And I very much doubt that anybody else in British politics has worked the hours and had so little fun as me over the course of the last few years.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
And
I don't see how paying your wife makes up for that.
Well, because actually, Nick, when you get home at midnight, if you're lucky, you need someone there to actually say, I've done this, I've done that, here are the documents for tomorrow, and without having unpaid assistance from my wife for 7 years, and paid in a very modest way for 5 years, I couldn't have done it.
Do you enjoy what you do?
Yes, I do, because I think that when I was in business for 20 years, I got into politics because I felt that the career political class in Westminster had given away my birthright, our ability to govern our own country, and I'm on a mission to get that back, and I think those messages are getting through, so yes, I love it.
Nick Clegg, we talked a little bit about the promise you made as a younger man back in 2008. We've talked about tuition fees. This is a hurdle you have to cross, isn't it?
No, look, I totally accept that when you're dealing with something as important as whether we stay in or out of the European Union, it shouldn't be just up to people to hear what politicians have to say. People should be given access to the facts, because I think so many of the facts have been distorted for so long. I think many people feel that they just hear lots of polemic, lots of rhetoric. They want to know what the facts are. They want to know what the facts are about the number of jobs that are at stake, how we catch criminals, how we protect ourselves from climate change. And I just think, at the end of the day, it comes down to whether you believe that the world has changed such that you can actually do more by working with other countries, or whether you achieve more, and I don't think we could, by simply becoming isolated and turning our back on the rest of the world.
What I want to do, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you for about 45-second answers, and I'm going to have to be quite brief on this. This is the final LBC listener email from Polina Poloniva. Why are countries such as Ukraine so keen to develop closer ties with the EU, while in the UK there is a debate about doing the opposite? We have to be fairly brutal on time. I'll come to you first, Mr. Clegg.
I think Paulina makes a very important point. It was very moving to see those people demonstrating for their freedom, demonstrating for their rights, some of them dying for it, in Kiev. And what we've seen in the European Union, despite its flaws, yes, it needs to be reformed, is you've seen a number of countries that were under the communist yoke in Central and Eastern Europe becoming democracies because they've become part of the family of nations within the European Union. You've seen a number of dictatorships in the south of Europe that have become part of the European Union and have become democracies, having been fascist dictatorships. And that, I think, is one of the things we can be proud of, because it was the British governments that pioneered the enlargement of the European Union, so we'd have more peace, more democracy and more rule of law in our European neck of the woods.
Mr. Clegg, thank you for being so brief. You must respond as well, Nigel.
We can hang our heads in shame. The British government has actually G'd up the European Union to pursue effectively an imperialist, expansionist, and even Mr. Barroso, the Commission President, once himself said, that we are building an empire. We've given a false series of hopes to a group of people in the Western Ukraine. So G'd up were they. that they actually toppled their own elected leader. That provoked Mr. Putin, and I think the European Union, frankly, does have blood on its hands in the Ukraine, and I don't want a European army, navy, air force, or a European foreign policy. It has not been a thing for good in the Ukraine.
We come to our closing statements. Again, it falls to Nick Clegg to go first. It has to be a tight minute, Deputy Prime Minister. Please start.
You know what's at stake here. British jobs, safety, our economic recovery, our place in the world. So don't be fooled, because quitting Europe would put all of that at risk. All of it. And it would also turn us into a country that we don't want to be, closed and narrow, isolated. I want us to be Great Britain, not Little England. And if you feel the same, then now is the time to make your voice heard, because Labour and the Conservatives are going to do nothing to stop us heading towards the exit. So if you believe, as I do, even if you haven't voted for the Liberal Democrats before, but if you believe that we're better off in, then at least on this occasion, on May the 22nd, in the European elections, I hope you will give us your support.
Mr. Clegg, thank you. A minute for you. Thank you. Nigel Farage.
Nick Clegg did not answer the question that I repeatedly asked him tonight, namely, is it true that we have a total open door to 485 million people from Europe, many of them from poor countries? He wouldn't answer that. The answer is yes, we have a total open door, and that is the issue, I think, that has woken people up, that by being a member of the European Union, we've lost the ability to govern our country and to control our borders. Now, Nick represents a tired status quo, defending a model that maybe 40 years ago looked like a good idea, but leaves us totally unfit to compete in a 21st century global economy. Trade with Europe, cooperation with Europe, friendship with Europe, but I'm British. I believe the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves, and I believe that by divorcing ourselves from this failed project, not only will we free Britain, we'll provide a good example for much of the rest of Europe too. I think the majority of people are now on our side. They believe we must get our country back. We're going to fight damned hard in the next few weeks and put that choice on the ballot paper for you on May the 22nd.
Nigel Farage, thank you for that. And that is all we have time for, I'm sorry. Hopefully you might now know whether you're in, you're out, or perhaps just a little shaken all about. So who won? The verdict follows immediately on LBC with continuous coverage from Ian Dale in the spin room. And remember, Nick Clegg is with me tomorrow morning at 9 on the LBC Breakfast Show for Call Clegg. Nigel Farage joins me the day after on Friday. Many thanks to you for listening and watching, to our studio audience and questioners, and of course to Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage for taking part in this leaders' debate. Good night.
Thank you, Nigel.
We are also in the spin room, as you can see. Let's get immediate reaction from some of the journalists here to see what they felt. Let's start with the LBC presenter Julia Hartley-Brewer. What was it for you?
Well, it's interesting, actually, watching it on television. I would have thought, for me, I thought Farage won because, look, he's supposed to be Mr. Bloke, average man in the pub, but he knew his facts, he came across well. But then, of course, Nick Clegg is a bit of a smoother presenter. He's had a lot more practice. He's done this 3 times before, of course, before the 2010 general election. So I think a lot of it's about who had the most to lose. And I think, in a way, Nick Clegg had the most to lose, Nigel Farage the most to gain. And I think, to a certain extent, they both won tonight.
OK, great. Thanks very much indeed. Let's also bring in Susie Boniface, a.k.a. Fleet Street Fox. Hi, saw you tweeting during the debate. What did you think?
I think no one who actually watched that is going to have changed their mind as a result of it. I think whatever you thought on the way in is probably what you think on the way out. We've just seen a really bitter row, the kind that probably Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow have been having for the last few months. And what basically we're talking about is Nick thinks you can have a conscious uncoupling, and you can just Farage thinks you can have a conscious uncoupling and just very quietly divorce, and no one's any the worse for it. And Nick Clegg wants to argue it's going to be a traumatic divorce. All the institutions will be completely torn up, crockery everywhere, cutting the sleeves off suits, and it's going to be terrible. And it comes down really to who you believe in the end and who you really trust. And I think probably on radio, it came across fairly even. On telly, I disagree with Julia. I think Nigel ended up looking quite sweaty by the end, and on telly, that's going to look very bad. I think on telly, Nick probably won.
And Farage talking about same-sex marriage, did he shoot himself in the foot on that one?
I think for a London audience, he probably has. Perhaps not for his core vote, further outside London, who are less cosmopolitan about these things. It's also perhaps not quite the main cause the debate as far as most people are concerned. But I think generally what's going to happen in the European elections is they're going to try and push the debate as far away from that European thing as much as possible, turn it into things like gay marriage, things like other, greater national issues, and try and put Farage on the back foot. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next debate.
Great to talk to you. Great to see you in Purple on Purple Day. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Just have a look behind. I just want to show our viewers what's happening. You can see Danny Alexander is speaking there, as indeed is Andrew Mitchell. They're live on LBC just at the moment, hoping to grab them in just a moment or two as soon as they've finished. So in the meantime, let's back up if you would please, Dave, and let's see if we can bring in Mr. Harry Cole. You're live on Sky News just at the moment. What do you think?
I think that was a no-score draw, really. I mean, the base camps would all agree that their man won, but I think Nick Clegg, it was Nigel Farage to lose. Nick Clegg did not punch him out of the park. Nick Clegg is the Deputy Prime Minister. He's up against the leader of the fourth party. He did not land the proper blows that he should have done.
One or two, though, don't you think?
I don't know. I think Farage...
Perhaps not a bloody nose.
No, I think they're going to do it all again next week. There's no real killer blow for either of them. I think that Farage went into this with the most to lose, and therefore I'm going to call it for him, because he stood for his own at the top table of British politics, and he stayed there.
What do you think were the most interesting topics? They tended to lose us a little bit with all those figures blinding us with the science.
When they say, "Oh well, my facts are better than your facts," well, obviously then you get into a sort of fact of. I think the central argument that the Lib Dems and Tim Farron behind me is making, that 3 million jobs will be lost by for Britain if we left the EU, that was blown apart by Farage today, and Clegg had very little to say to come back on that. I think Clegg started out weak, but he did pull it back in the end. But he's used to doing these debates.
What about the personalities?
I think that Farage was a little bit too scatty. He was a little bit sweaty, a little bit all over the place. Where Clegg did manage. He's a professional politician. He's the Deputy Prime Minister. He can hold his own. He was trying to rise above the bait. But I think if people are going to get excited in this conversation, then we need some more punches.
Okay, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Just having a quick look around, lots of briefings going on just at the moment. We're going to see who we can talk to. But first, let's bring in Adam. Hi, Adam.
Thanks very much indeed, Kay. Well, let's ask our panel of top journalists and commentators. Isabel Oakeshott, Cameron biographer, what did you think?
I thought that Farage won, but only very, very narrowly. I thought they were pretty evenly matched, and I think both will go home tonight feeling they've done a good job.
Well, I thought Nick Clegg got off to quite a slow start, because that opening question on the referendum was quite difficult, because ultimately Farage's point that people who oppose a referendum oppose it because they think the British people will give, in quotes, the wrong answer. Ultimately, that's kind of true, and that put Nick Clegg on a very defensive battle at the beginning. I think he pulled it back. I think he showed a bit more pace through the course of the debate, and ultimately he seemed more steady and confident of his position throughout. So it's very hard to call.
What about the FT?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that initially I was worried for Clegg. I thought he got off to a very poor start. But by the end of the debate, Farage was looking a bit tetchy, a bit sweaty, which kind of matters on television, I think. And I think to some extent they were also trading scare stories. I mean, Farage's scare story about millions of immigrants against Clegg's scare story about millions of jobs going to be lost. I mean, I think the debate's actually a bit more nuanced than that.
Well, we're just hearing from the LBC Worm. They say that by a whisker, Farage has got it tonight. We're going to have the YouGov poll later on. I mean, my feeling about it was that Nigel Farage did not manage to win most of the points he tried to make. He made assertions which he then backed away from. Did look quite sweaty, and he did look quite angry at times. And I have to say, I felt there was an astonishing statement in the final minutes. The European Union has blood on its hands for geeing on Ukraine to take on Putin.
I was interested you noticed that. I mean, I thought, basically, he took the Kremlin line on Ukraine, and I wondered whether the audience out there will pick that up. It was a very striking thing to say, but it was so kind of out of left field. You were thinking, did he really just say that?
I think we'll be back in a moment. Let's go back to Kay.
OK, Adam, thanks. John Redwood, I've found here in the spin room. What did you make of that, then?
Well, I think it was a debate which revealed that the pro-Europeans just trot out some tired old platitudes which are simply wrong, and they were very badly damaged and punctured tonight by the Farage questioning. No, I listened very carefully to the debate, and the main central proposition that we would lose 3 million jobs is a simple lie. There is no way that the rest of the EU will want to put their trade with us at risk and destroy jobs in Britain that are making products for their market, because they have many more people making products for our market, and that came out rather well. But the problem with the debate, of course, is I think it just shows that what the British public want is a serious government that will negotiate a new relationship with the EU that makes sense, that protects the trade, but gets rid of the unpleasant government interruptions and interventions, and then gives the British people the vote they're desperate to have on whether they should stay in on that basis or not. No, that is what the Conservatives will offer.
Though, didn't he, on
Mr.
some of his
Farage
pamphlet
can't
figures.
offer that. I don't remember him getting caught out on figures. I think he had chosen figures carefully and Mr. Clegg wanted to choose different figures. But the problem with Mr. Farage is not in his ability to show how bad the Clegg case is. The problem with Mr. Farage is he can't offer anybody anything that he can deliver, because if Mr. Farage says he wants a referendum, he doesn't have a single MP in the House of Commons to deliver one, whereas the Conservatives are very close to having a working majority in the House of Commons, and we want to go to the electorate and win that majority so that we can lay this to bed once and for all by having the renegotiation and then giving people that proper choice.
Okay, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Adam, I'm going to come back to you in just a second, Adam. Just want to bring in Tim Farron. Hi, what do you make of it?
How are you? I thought it was great. I thought the electorate was the winner because they have a clear choice in the European elections now. If you think Britain's place at the heart of Europe, defending 3 million jobs and protecting our status in the world is worth fighting for, then you vote Liberal Democrat, you vote yes. If you want to be isolated, you vote UKIP, you vote no. I thought Nick won it. I'm bound to think that, but I genuinely think that as well. It's the first time probably since Margaret Thatcher and John Major you've got someone at the head of a British government who've actually had the backbone to make the case for Britain's interest being better off served in Europe.
Do you think, to what extent do you think the audience is going to be interested, fascinated when they start getting down to the nitty-gritty of figures? Tended to lose us a bit in the middle.
Probably. I think the facts are important, though, because a lot of the facts that have been presented as facts over the last 20 years or so aren't facts, and so it's important they're kind of taken apart. And so, yes, some people will have found that dull, but I think people who watch the programme will have felt that they wanted some clarification as to what does the European arrest warrant mean, where are these 3 million jobs, and the details of, for example, Siemens' threat that they would leave the UK if we weren't in the European Union. These are facts and they are important things to base your vote upon.
And what does Nick Clegg have to learn from today?
Well, not a lot. I think it was...
come on.
Well, I mean, any event that you take part in, of course, you can learn from. I think the reality is that both Nick and Nigel came into this debate with very clear standpoints. I think Nick needs to be even bolder in the future, knowing that actually there's a vast proportion of people in this country, hopefully a majority, who probably actually do agree with Nick and feel that Britain's interests win. It's not about being pro or anti-Europe. It's about being pro or anti-Britain's interests in the world. And being isolated, losing jobs is not patriotic. That's not in British interest. And I think Nick will be even bolder in the future as we go forward to make this case that, you want to stay in, be relevant, keep your job, vote Liberal Democrat.
Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. So over here we have got Andrew Mitchell, who is still taking part in that debate. As you can see, Danny Alexander has left. He has headed in the other direction here in the spin room. I'm going to try, and as you can see, Nick Ferrari has leapt upstairs and he is already taking part in that debate with Ian Dale. Andrew Mitchell looking at his watch. Now, does that mean I stay here and wait to chat to him, or does it mean that I go and look for Danny Alexander? Adam, I'm going to let you come in quickly and see what happens. Andrew Mitchell writing copious notes just at the moment. Adam, did you hear what Tim Farron was saying when he said that Nick had nothing to learn for next week?
Well, I thought it was a very polished performance by Nick Clegg, of the sort, as you've already said, he's had practice at this in the 3 previous leaders' debates. For example, he spoke directly to the camera a lot. He was the only one who picked up the names of the questioners and answered them. And while he was quite deliberate in having his say and sometimes going over time and being hurried by Nick Ferrari, who chaired this extremely well, he kept his cool throughout. It was, on the other hand, from Nigel Farage, an equally characteristic performance. He's a man who likes making statements and doesn't so much like engaging in argument about them.
OK, Adam, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Managed to grab Nick Ferrari. Hi, how'd it go?
I hope that your viewers got a good debate from it. I think it went very well, actually. You always reflect on it. You'll know this. You've done it. But I think both men came ready for the fight. Perhaps at times we got a little bit bogged down with trading numbers, and you have to be aware that listeners or viewers start to lose it. But listen, It was great to have an audience reaction. They got the rounds of applause that perhaps they needed. I'm picking up that there's quite a bigger reaction on Twitter, so I think it's job well done for LBC and Sky News.
OK, did you have a view on who might have won?
Do you know, you're not the first person to ask. You always ask...
And what did you say?
Listen, well, you know, you're so... And you'll have had this. There's someone in your accounting to explain to your viewers now. You've got to make sure they get balanced. So, honestly, Kay, I'm making sure that I've not given... And we've come in within 57 seconds or 56 seconds. So I really don't have a view. I suppose if you went from the rounds of applause, perhaps Nigel Farage got louder applause, but then Nick Clegg possibly did better with the statistics. It's tough to call.
Yeah, and certainly Nigel Farage looked a little bit nervous to start with. Took him a little while to get in his stride.
Yes, he'd written this newspaper column saying, does Nick Clegg realise what's in store for him? I think perhaps actually when it started, he needed to get into the groove a little bit. And it wasn't until Nick Clegg started saying figures, and as you saw on Sky News, you've got Nigel Farage angrily shaking his head. That, I think, gave him the impetus, and it was on for young and old.
Great job, well done.
OK, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Keeping hold of Andrew Mitchell, aren't they, over there? I have seen Danny Alexander head in that general direction, actually. Adam, going to try and head over there and have a chat with him. You heard what Nick was saying there, Nick Ferrari, a short time ago. Do you agree with Nick?
I seldom disagree with Nick Ferrari, at least. Anyway, Kay, as you've been pointing out, neither Ed Miliband nor David Cameron participated in this debate, but the Labour and Conservative parties are fielding spokesmen on tonight's performances by the UKIP and Lib Dem leaders. And joining me now is the Labour MP for Leicester South, John Ashworth. Welcome to you indeed. Your first impression of that debate?
Well, it was a sort of amusing sideshow, if you like, but the reality is people out there are struggling. They're struggling to pay the bills. They're worried that their pay packet...
more than an amusing sideshow, isn't it? I mean, if there are 3 million jobs at stake, or we could have more jobs if we were out of the EU, surely those are important matters, and they do cut to the fundamentals.
Well, they are important matters, but the reality is Nick Clegg can't be the solution to the cost of living crisis that we in the Labour Party talk about.
Yeah, but I want to talk about Europe for now. It's been a debate about Europe. I don't want more slogans about the cost of living crisis.
I appreciate that, but the reality is, I think the British people at the moment are more worried about paying the bills. They're more worried about whether their pay packets will stretch the end of the month.
So you're just saying we've all wasted our time here? Because, I mean, there's a lot of media interest. I mean, you know, on that Europe debate, what interested you?
Well, I think it is an interesting debate about jobs and our future in Europe and our ability to
and where do you
get investment.
Pro-Europe on that?
No, we're a pro-European party, and we think our future is in the European Union. Nick Clegg said that. Nigel Farage wants us to pull out of Europe, but I think mainstream parties want us to stay within Europe.
You see, Farage said you weren't there because you're deeply split on Europe in the Labour Party.
No, we're not deeply split, but we weren't there because this is not a debate between the two potential prime ministers. The next election is a choice between David Cameron or Ed Miliband. Well, yeah, it's a debate on Europe, and we have European spokespeople who will go off and debate as well, but they're not the leaders of the party. I know Gareth Thomas, our European spokesperson, was doing a lot of media today, but the reality is, you know, the British people, I think, are more concerned about the cost of living.
OK, thank you for that. Back to Kay. Right,
thanks. OK, as you can see, Danny Alexander and Patrick O'Flynn from both sides of the debate with me now. How did it go, Mr Alexander?
I thought it was an extremely good debate. It was great for the British people to hear both sides of the argument put so powerfully. I thought that Nick Clegg made the case for Britain being part of the European Union very strongly, very passionately, very much focusing on the issues about the economy and jobs. I thought that he was the clear winner of the debate tonight, showing himself to be completely in command of the facts and in command of his brief, and making the argument that Britain is better off, stronger, has more clout in the world, and British people are more secure because we're part of the European Union, making clear at the end there that the only way for people to show their support for that position is to vote for the Liberal Democrats in the European elections.
OK, you're media manager for UKIP. I'm guessing you disagree.
I disagree in terms of who won the debate, but I do say fair play to Nick Clegg for turning up and putting his point of view. This is an enormously exciting night for UKIP, because it's the night that UKIP and Nigel Farage have taken lead of the Eurosceptic movement in this country. You know, you had two guys, two impressive politicians arguing the case in or out. Enormous media interest, enormous public interest. And Nick Clegg, you know, he played to his niche. It's quite a small niche, but there is a niche. But that left the whole of Eurosceptic opinion represented by Nigel Farage, who really connected, and it's not surprising we're the fastest growing party in British politics, because this place is awash with Conservative MPs tonight, but the one who really matters didn't have the bottle to come up and debate. I think it's a catastrophic miscalculation from David Cameron. I'm delighted he's made it, of course. The one real downer for Nick Clegg, I think, was the look at the small print
Andrew
comment.
Mitchell's joining us as we're chatting. Hello to you. Let me just bring him in as well. How do you think it went?
I thought it was an extremely good debate. I don't think either side won, but it made sure that there was a really good discussion about very important issues. I think it was very well worth doing.
There were no knockout blows, were there?
There weren't. I thought it was a score draw. Both these two will be saying that their man won, but I think in the truth it was a score draw, really.
I think we can both agree that the big losers tonight were Labour and the Conservative parties. They didn't turn up to make the argument. What you actually have is a very clear argument from UKIP, one I fundamentally disagree with, that Britain should leave the European Union. Very strong argument tonight from Nick Clegg about why we're better off fighting our corner within the European Union, arguing for reforms within the European Union, but making sure that we continue to get the economic benefits, those millions of jobs in the UK that are linked to our place in Europe. And it's a very clear divide. It's a very clear argument. Conservatives clearly very split on Europe. Labour not making an argument for Europe. And I think Nick Clegg showing himself again tonight to be someone who is proud and passionate about what he believes and got that message across very, very strongly.
I don't think it'll wash, Danny. I mean, if looking at the audience reaction afterwards, the people who were in the audience who came along to take part in Ian Dale's after-match commentary, I think the big winners of this could well be the Conservative Party's argument that what we need is an in-out referendum at the end of 2017, but before then we need to have a serious renegotiation on the things that really matter to Europe's future. And I think that is an argument which will come out of tonight. It's an argument that we as a party will be making very strongly. We need to have a proper in-out referendum for the first time in a generation, but we need it after there's been a period to negotiate and discuss changes in Europe.
Stand by.
I think it's quite hilarious that the Tories have turned up with all the paraphernalia of an established governing party with Tory MPs. There's probably more Conservatives here than there are in terms of the UKIP entourage, but the guy who's supposed to be leading their debate didn't turn up, and they know it's been a fantastic hit. They know it's captured the public imagination, but UKIP represents Eurosceptic Britain. It's a great night for us.
10-second up, some.
Well, I think it was a great event. Will be another debate next week. I think it really is illuminating for people in this country, one of the most important debates, showing people why we're much better off as part of the European Union. I thought Nick Clegg won hands down tonight. He was authoritative, he was calm, he was clear, he made his arguments strongly. I think Nigel Farage went a bit...
That's a lot more than 10 seconds.
It had more than 10 seconds, but all important stuff to say.
OK, thank you. Final thought. I read a tweet saying that you rolled your eyes when they said that we should trust the police.
You certainly, well, if you did, I certainly didn't express any reaction whatsoever when that point was made. In fact, I don't even recall hearing it during the debate.
OK, thank you all, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. So there you go. We had the views from the Conservatives, we had views from UKIP, we had views from the Liberal Democrats here in the spin room. But what about views from you? Adam?
Well, split views, as you're saying, down there in the spin room, but we do now have the first representative opinion poll. I believe the only one that's going to be conducted tonight. It is conducted by YouGov, and here with me is the President of YouGov, Peter Kellner. Tell us about it.
Adam, as soon as the debate was over, we polled just over 1,000 people, 1,003 people who we knew in advance we were going to watch it and give their verdict afterwards. And I don't know if we've got the graphics up to show people, but we do have a clear winner. 57% said they thought Nigel Farage had done better. 36% said Nick Clegg, 7% said no. Now, I should explain that this is a politically representative sample. This is meant to match politically the country as a whole. We know from our work ahead that people who are fanatical on both sides, but especially in the UKIP side, were more likely to watch or listen to the programme.
But you've also polled Liberal Democrats, Greens.
Yeah, but we've ironed that out. So we got so in terms of current lie of the land, the right number of Tory supporters, Labour, Lib Dem, and UKIP supporters, and we've adjusted our raw data to that, and it is a pretty clear victory.
I mean, it's a 21% gap between the two by my maths. That is a big gap, as you say. Any sign signs of how this is affecting supporters in the various camps? I mean, presumably UKIP 100%.
Yeah, if we can show them, we've got the. We can show what the supporters of different parties said. Conservative supporters, they went 3-1 for Farage, 69-70% for Nigel Farage, 20% for Nick Clegg. Perhaps you might expect that. Labour one, this is interesting because it's very tight. 42% Farage, 51% Clegg. Now, given it's Labour's position to be pro-Europe, and Labour has got a pretty similar position to Nick Clegg on the issue of a referendum, you'd have thought Labour supporters might go much more for Nick Clegg than Farage. It's pretty close. Lib Dem supporters, well, a bit of a surprise here, because yes, the majority go for Nick Clegg, 77%, but 20% of Lib Dem supporters. Yeah. One Lib Dem supporter in 5 thought Farage had done better.
And don't knows, uncommitted?
And don't knows, 3% there, but UKIP, 93% said Farage, 4% said
of the don't
Clegg.
knows.
So of the UKIP. In this sort of poll, there are not many political don't knows because the people who watch it or listen to it are politically interested.
Now, Patrick O'Flynn, the former journalist who's now head of spin for UKIP and standing for the European elections, just said Nigel Farage tonight has claimed the leadership of the Eurosceptic movement in Britain. Do you think that's true?
I think it's the sort of thing I would expect somebody even say, just as Danny Alexander said, Nick Clegg won hands down. You know, what do you expect them to say? Frankly, I think these spin room exercises are
I suppose
pretty
what I'm asking you is, if you look more broadly at the polls you've been conducting, if you think that it's true what Nigel Farage says, that only a third of his voters come from the Conservatives, or if he is now driving a wedge into the heart of the Conservative vote.
Let me say two things. One is, our figures are different from those that Nigel Farage quoted. We reckon half of UKIP support comes from the Conservatives. The other half comes from all over the place in little penny packets. But the second thing is this. When we at YouGov ask a slightly different question, in or out, and at the moment, incidentally, in have moved slightly ahead. Slightly more people say stay in than come out. But when we ask array of choices, complete integration, status quo, some repatriation of powers, if you like, the Cameron position, or get out, the Farage position, only about 1 person in 5, 1 person in 4 says get out, 20-25%. A lot of the people who would say in an in-out referendum they voted out don't really want Britain to leave. They would prefer a looser relationship, but if they could get a looser relationship, for Britain to stay in.
So, to recap, Peter Kellner, on who do you think performed best? Nigel Farage, 57% of a representative sample. Nick Clegg, 36% of that sample. Just 7% don't know. Thank you very much indeed.
OK, Adam, thank you. Found 2 fantastic women to speak to now. Benedict Pavio, who can give us the European view, and Anne Treneman, who we were chatting to a little bit earlier on, sketch writer at the Times, of course. What did you think?
I think it was fascinating to watch, finally, a national debate that this country, the UK, is tearing itself up over. This is being watched very closely, not just in France. I don't just mean this debate, but the whole possibility of the exit of the UK. There is great frustration, there is still deep misunderstanding, and there is quite a bit of mistrust, I think. And I think that the view on the continent generally is that Britain needs to make a decision once and for all, because this really is an important question and it's terribly, terribly drawn out. As far as the 2, Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage tonight, I thought that marginally, I thought Nick Clegg was the stronger player. I thought that he came up with a lot of facts and he managed to land quite a lot of blows, surprisingly, on Nigel Farage. I just wonder if one closed one's eyes, if one was watching the TV feed, if there was a difference. I thought that Nigel Farage looked a bit nervous at the beginning, which is very uncharacteristic for him. He can charm just about anybody. I've watched him charm colleagues and turn them around 360 degrees. He did land some blows, but I think that Nick Clegg looked quite, well, Deputy Prime Minister, and I think that, interestingly, I think that kind of power and authority gave him a confidence. Okay. I thought also that Nigel Farage was slightly iffy on the self-justification about the employment of his wife.
Okay, slightly iffy, Anne.
Slightly iffy. I think Nigel Farage probably considers that's a compliment. I actually think that Farage probably won the night. Because for him, this is his big arrival on the political stage. And so for him, he's already won almost by getting on stage, and he didn't fall over. And both Nick and he sounded dodgy, admittedly at different points. But I thought that it was kind of fascinating the way Nick was refusing to turn his body towards Nigel. And I found he was like a man in a straitjacket, sort of trying to kind of trying to look really sort of smooth, but also like really stiff. So I'm afraid, I think Nigel might have just won it.
Okay, and you've got copy to write, ladies. I'll let you do that. Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks. So pretty balanced actually here, just at the moment, 50-50 on both sides, both for Nick Clegg and also Nigel Farage. Let us know what you think. News at sky.com 84501. Tweet me directly if you would like to at Kay Burley. Joey Jones, what did you think?
Well, we picked up, obviously, on a range of issues that we'll show you after the break, but particularly it's Nigel Farage who is known for enjoying a drink. But if you have a look at this, and we'll show you more after the break, it was Nick Clegg who was in thirsty mood this evening. How many glasses did he get through?
Maybe left up to 87%.
Hello again, we are in the spin room just after the debate between Clegg and Farage. Just looking who LBC have got on at the moment. Tom Newton done him, John Redwood done him. Joey Jones, they haven't done him. Joey?
Well, I thought that, as we've discussed, Nick Clegg is the more professional performer in this sort of forum. He's done it many times before, and he demonstrated it again. A couple of examples. Firstly, his much vaunted ability to remember questioners' names, as opposed to Nigel Farage.
We've passed into law a legal guarantee for you, Deborah.
And surely, what the lady's really saying is, why don't you trust her? Because they've actually given up believing anything that you say.
And then maybe Nigel Farage, you see there just talking about the lady in the audience who'd asked the question. Perhaps on substance more important was the fact that Nick Clegg rattled off a list of big multinational companies that he said that their leaders were saying that they would leave if the UK were not in the EU. He had the big names at his fingertips. Nigel Farage didn't.
Just the other day, I was up in Sunderland. Nissan, a major employer, they employ over 7,000 people in the northeast.
I spoke to a business yesterday that was about to set up. They approached the Forum for Private Business to ask for advice on employment law. They were sent a document that is 350 pages long.
It's a perfectly fair point being made by Nigel Farage, but I spoke to a business yesterday, unnamed, didn't have the same resonance as what the Deputy Prime Minister was saying. Nick Clegg was desperate to ignore Nigel Farage. That was very striking throughout. He wanted to be talking to the camera, to the audience, and not going toe-to-toe with the UKIP leader.
What are you on about? We had one of your friends from Brussels, Commissioner Viviane Reding, in London the other week, saying we must all sign up to the United States of Europe and we must recognise the importance of Brussels because, after all, it makes 70% of our laws.
You can see Nick Clegg absolutely finding his notes far more interesting, apparently, than anything that Nigel Farage might have to say. But they did get stuck into one another. Let me show you one excerpt where things really did start to catch fire a little bit, where Nigel Farage was piling in on free movement of people within the EU.
The fact is, if we're members of the European Union, we have the complete free flow of people. Are you denying that?
Yes, it is not unqualified.
You are denying
it is not the case that anyone can move to this country and simply claim benefits, simply
Didn't mention benefits. You keep doing benefits. We're talking about the free movement of people and the ability in John's industry to get a job.
But then on the other side, another feisty exchange where Nick Clegg was getting the better of things, really, about the European arrest warrant and why Nigel Farage hadn't supported it in the European Parliament.
I have not voted in 15 years for one single piece of legislation that has added to the power base of the European Commission in Brussels,
even when it means British tourists who get caught up on the wrong side of the law when on holiday, who need translation, they need help, they need lawyers, they need assistance. Why is it that UKIP dogma is so strong now, you won't even help British tourists when they're on the wrong side of the law?
I'll tell you one thing that all political parties will learn from this debate. Don't put stupid things on electoral literature. Nick Clegg was haunted by a poster that he'd published back in 2008, but then he produced one to have a go at Nigel Farage too.
This is a leaflet that Nigel Farage's party distributed in the recent Eastleigh by-election. You may remember it. It says here that 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians may come to this country. There aren't even 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians living in Romania and Bulgaria. It is simply not true.
And just finally, as I said a moment ago, we know that Nigel Farage likes a drink. Well, Nick Clegg was turning to his glass of water an awful lot. We've done a little montage to demonstrate to you as this was going on through the evening. I don't know how many glasses he had under there, quite frankly. I guess that when you've just got your notes in front of you and studio audience, there aren't that many things that you can do to try to demonstrate that you are really not interested in what your opponent is saying, but that was his favoured tactic tonight.
It was very busy on Twitter, was it not? In fact, Twitter's head exploded here in the spin room. One of the most prolific tweeters is here, none other than, I'm not going to talk to you because he's on the grog, so it's a very bad idea, but Harry Cole, otherwise known as Guido Fawkes. He was tweeting a lot during that debate. Jane Secker with another couple of tweeters. What did they think, Jane?
Westminster as well. We've been monitoring Twitter reaction to the debate, and we can also bring the results of the exclusive Sky News Twitter poll in just a moment. You told us who you think had won, but first of all, let's talk to Felicity Moore. She's the social media editor at The Independent, and Jim Waterson, the political editor of BuzzFeed, who've been hanging around watching the debate with us. Now, Felicity, before we started, you tweeted, Felicity Morse, I'm calling it. Nick Clegg will win. Nigel spent. What performance can he pull out of the bag that he hasn't before? Did he pull it out of the bag?
No. So I did get a bit gushy when he was going on about gay marriage. That was nice. But he just came across as like a very...
And that was a big spike in terms of Twitter usage. We've seen footage, which that was the one point that it really peaked the whole gay marriage debate.
Yeah, well, that's very emotive and also something that everybody can get behind, apart from Nigel Farage, obviously. But no, he didn't win. I think he came across as like a very polished performer and not necessarily believing in what he said. Whereas even if Nigel did get a little bit frothy and sweaty, well, like, at least he was believing what he was saying.
In terms of interest on Twitter, Jim, at one point it was the top 4 trends that people were trending and talking about, all with different hashtags. It really did seem to capture the imagination of Twitter. What did you make of the standard of the debate? Was it accessible, or was it a lot too much figures?
I think the debate, as I said beforehand, split along the sides we expected. You had the UKIP guys on Twitter shouting for their man. They were braying for blood. They were all saying that their man had battered this weenie little Clegg. And the Lib Dems are saying, you know, clearly the Farage has no grasp of the facts. This is a walkover. You know, anyone who can look at the facts. But I'm not really sure that talking about statistics cuts through to normal people.
Let's just look at some of those pro and anti tweets now. Isabel Oakeshott, of course, we had here in the studio. Cameron should be very worried by Farage's performance thus far. And Watsy, I really agree with him, but you can't deny that Farage is a fantastic orator. I mean, you talked about him looking a bit sweaty by the end, and that may be not appealing, but we had those pictures of him in the pub beforehand. Does he have the common touch, do you think? That got across to the voters?
Well, I mean, orator. I mean, we've got, like, you know, Julius Caesar, Winston Churchill, and we've got, like, sort of Farage, who kind of belches his arguments out, and that's a bit unfair. But, so maybe, I think fantastic orator is a little strong, and I think that most of Twitter would probably agree with me there.
What about the Lib Dems? A couple of pro-Lib Dem ones here. Alexander Hogg, Farage is all rhetoric, no detail. Clegg provides compelling arguments for the EU. And Alex Stevenson there at the bottom. Clegg clearly won the stats war in this debate. Farage has been embarrassed more than once. What do you think, Jim?
Again, I don't really think that stats really matter too much on this. You're not going to convince anyone who's wavering on the basis of stats. You're going to convince them on an emotive argument based on whether you feel very strongly about this. And I think Farage is going to see a lot of his supporters fired up this weekend on the basis of that performance, out pounding the streets and trying to win council seats, which will actually make a difference.
What about this? There was also this, I agree with Nick. We had a lot of the I agree with Deborah. She was the first questioner. And then, of course, Twitter started this I agree with Nick. Loads of Lib Dems tweeting the same thing. We then eventually had Faisal Islam saying, please no one use the phrase agree with Nick again. Clearly this was some kind of Lib Dem campaign that they'd pre-agreed and everybody started retweeting at the same time. Do you think that's effective, or do you think that just alienates viewers?
I can't really see it on a slogan, you know, on the billboard on the side of the road, or people waving it as a protest. It's not really going to get you that fired up. But
I think some people got confused with the Nicks at some point, so there was some confusion that, well, not confusion, maybe it was a joke, but they were saying that basically Nick Farage and Nigel Farage and Nick Clegg and Nick Ferrari, they have, like, if you mash all their names together, then you've got, like, I don't know, the debate.
I mean, was there a slogan that leapt out at you tonight, apart from "I agree with," you know, the various questions? There wasn't anything that really stuck in your head, was there?
I don't think there's much that's going to be sort of live long in the memory in terms of one-liners, but I think Farage slightly made a mistake at the end by talking about the EU having blood on its hands over Ukraine. I mean, that's quite a dubious line, which I think we'll probably see in a few of the papers tomorrow morning.
And just briefly before we go, Nigel Farage himself tweeting, well, that was fun. Are you with Team Nigel? Lib Dem press off saying, it's a win for us. They would say that, wouldn't they? Let's give you, though, the result of what you thought, Sky News viewers thought. We asked you to go onto the Sky News Twitter feed and retweet either an image of Farage or an image of Clegg, depending on what you believed. And the results are 1,301 retweets for Nigel Farage. Nick Clegg only clocked up 557. So a substantial win there for Nigel Farage, according to Sky News viewers. Kay.
What did Nick Clegg think? He was leaving a few seconds ago. This is what he had to say.
Of the debate. Did you think you won? Did you win? I enjoyed it very much. Thank you. I will let other people judge. Thank you. How do you think you did? Thank you very much. Thank you.
You'd have eyes in the back of your head in this spin room, just keeping an eye on who Ian Dale has got on. Foxy, yep, done her. Benedict, yep, done her. We have got a couple of audience members behind you, Dave, that we're going to be chatting to in just a moment or two. A couple of the ones that actually asked the questions. Why did they pose those questions that they did? This is Nigel Farage leaving. This is what he had to say.
Did you won that debate? Did you win?
I've no idea. You must be the judges of that. I told it as I think it was the right way to do. I think I was truthful. I found Mr. Clegg to be very evasive on what I think is the most central question and perhaps the most important question in British politics today. I kept asking him, is it true, Nick, that we've got an open door to 485 million people, all of whom can come here, and he would not answer that question. And my feeling is, if the great British public realised that truth, we'd be out of the European Union within a couple of years.
And more importantly, did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, Lord, yes, of course. Of course I enjoyed it. It was great. We were actually having an opportunity to discuss things that those of us in the Eurosceptic movement have cared very much about for decades, and finally a chance to discuss it in front of a real audience. So, yes.
And are you off down the pub to celebrate?
I'm not off to church.
What's your message to the other parties now, Nick?
Well, I would just say...
Oh, well and good journalists and politicians telling us what they think, but what about the audience? What about the questions that they asked? Why did they pose them? Jamila and Christopher, lucky enough to ask questions. What did you ask and what did you think of the answer?
I asked why Britain seems to comply so readily with all EU directives, whereas other countries seem to cherry-pick which ones they want to adopt or not.
Were you happy with the answer?
Well, I was not happy with Mr. Clegg's answer. He just seemed to say that we need rules. He didn't address the issue at all, whereas Mr. Farage did. Yes.
Jamila, what did you ask and what did you think of the responses?
I asked how were we supposed to compete against China or America if we were not part of a bigger trading partners group.
And what did you think of the responses?
Well, I thought Nick gave a better answer to the question than Mr. Farage, which just says, you know, we can do what we want. We don't need to be in the EU. We can go and do a trade agreement with whoever we want. We don't need to be with the EU.
Understood. Very quickly, who won?
Oh, well, I think Farage by a whisker, but
Okay.
a very, very thin whisker indeed. And Clegg was much better than I thought he'd be.
Okay, what about you, Jamila?
Nick Clegg for me.
Okay, great to talk to you both. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. So that's what the audience members thought. What about people watching on TV, not least those with Anushka Astana in Dover? What did they make of it, Anushka?
Yeah, we watched it here at the White Cliffs Hotel near Dover, the closest hotel to mainland Europe. So close that my mobile phone's been welcoming me to France. At the beginning of the night, some agreed with Nick, some agreed with Nigel. Let's see if anything's changed. Phil, you're fiercely pro-European, no fan of Nigel. Still the case?
Very much so. A popcorn politician. Yeah, he can debate, so what? It's not about the facts for him, it's just rhetoric.
But you thought he debated well?
Of course, yeah, but that's what he does well. That's his MO, that's what he does. Fair play to the man, but it doesn't leave me...
OK, not convinced. Peter, you're a retired policeman and you said that you think UKIP does speak to people's real concerns. How do you feel now?
I feel exactly the same. I think Nigel Farage came over very well.
people say he talks about what people want. Well, that's quite correct, he does, and what's wrong with that? But the main thing he talks about, especially around here, is immigration. That is the big problem we've got here.
So you were quite convinced tonight. Nick Clegg didn't change your mind?
Not at all.
Now, Eske, you were very animated during the debate. If I was to guess, I'd say you disagree with Peter and with Nigel.
Yeah, strongly. And the debate has changed my view in the sense that I'm even more terrified of Mr. Farage. Not because he has content, but quite the opposite. And I can't believe he did two things. First of all, that he actually talked about immigration as if it was a mandate of the EU, but the EU doesn't have anything to say in that specific field, so we should look at the UK government. The second thing is that he omits the fact that the UK is involved in every single lawmaking procedure in the EU. So actually he himself is sitting in the Parliament and can vote on every single law coming from Brussels, and he just leaves it out to his own benefit.
So you're a fan of Nick Clegg tonight?
Definitely.
You thought he did a good job, convince the public?
Well, it's difficult to argue against someone who is the anti-party and who knows how to speak, but given that fact, I think he did well.
Okay, and Anthony, at one point during the debate you said you disagreed with both men, particularly on the issue of a referendum. You don't think that would be the right thing to do?
I don't think that it would be the right thing to do. I believe that to make a judgment whether you stay on with EU or going out, you need huge knowledge and ability to process lots of data which you have to have access to.
So you don't think you got lots of knowledge tonight?
If the people would decide based on the debates like this, it wouldn't be right.
Okay, so if I was to sum up the view here in St Margaret's at Cliff, I'd say that those who started the evening agreeing with Nick are even more fiercely pro-European. And as for those who sided with Nigel, well, they still agree with Nigel Kay. There's been no major change of opinion here.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Anushka, thank you. Beers are out here in the spin room, goodness knows what might happen. I can tell you that it's European beer. Other beers are available. We're going to be chatting to some more journalists in just a moment. Stay tuned. Hello again to the spin room. Just seen Joey Jones arrive. That man is faster than a speeding bullet. I've also seen Stig Abel, who is over there, and Andrew Pearce from the Daily Mail there as well. Hopefully grab a word with them very shortly indeed. But first, let's take you to Brussels. Robert Nisbet standing by. What did they make of it, Robert?
Well, the Eurocrats in Brussels certainly got a good going over, didn't they? So one thing that the two men agreed on, that reform is necessary here in Brussels. Let's speak to our European commentators who are drawn from across the member states. Let's start off with Helena Kegel. You're German but educated in the UK. What did you think of the debate watching it?
I think it was interesting, heated and very sweaty. I'm not sure if the British public has been helped of forming an opinion of in or out. But at least provide food for thought, if you want.
When you say sweaty, you're referring to who?
Definitely Nigel.
Nigel,
yes.
So you thought he looked a little uncomfortable?
Very much. So uncomfortable, I'm not sure, but it just shows how heated the debate and how important it is for him.
Rasmus, who's sitting next to you, German, a little bit of German in there, but also some Swedish blood as well. What did you think of it?
Well, I think it was a heated debate and really energetic. You never find that in Germany or Sweden. But on the other hand, I was really worried about the words of Farage, actually, because he's using really simple language, attracts many the general public, and I think many people don't reflect really on what he says and take many things for granted. And if I kind of got it right, he got actually more of the applause than Nick Clegg got.
Lauren, did you think that? You're our guest from the United States, but studying here in Brussels. Did you think that Farage seemed to get more support?
I think he did, but I think he told us a lot about why the EU was bad for Britain, but I don't think he told us enough about what would happen if Britain actually did leave the EU.
So he didn't have a solution to...
He had a problem, but no solution, and that's what I was looking for.
Okay, and if I can turn finally to Balázs, Hungarian, studying here in Brussels as well. I mean, what did you feel about it? Did you sense that Britain could be heading for the exit after that?
Well, I don't think this would convince the population that the UK should exit. I think the fact that Nigel was a little bit sweaty by the end, I think that's just due to the air conditioning, that it wasn't functioning. I think Farage remained true to himself, so of course he's a good orator, and Clegg took more Clegg was more trying to pursue more rational arguments and trying to rationalize why the EU should remain within the EU, while Farage was just saying that we should leave, and he was using his abilities as an orator. And I agree with Rasmus, actually, in this sense, that this is very dangerous, but, well, I don't think it convinced anybody that the UK should cease to be a member of the European Union.
So emotional Farage, rational Clegg, as far as you're concerned, but you can be sure that this wasn't the only television in Brussels, Kay, that was watching that debate. A lot of people, I think, involved in the European Union institutions will have been taking a great deal of notice.
OK, Robert, thank you. Let's leave the last words to the spin room, should we? I managed to get Andrew Pearce and Stig Abel and Michael Deacon all in the same place at one time. I'm going to shimmy in between you guys. Andrew Pearce, what did you
between
think?
These thoughts. Well, I think it was great, and I think I'm not surprised by the margin with which Farage won by. And if people had listened to it just on the radio, he'd have won by even bigger margin, I think, because on TV he looked a bit sweaty, a bit red, and these are things that he could work out another time. And of course, Clegg looked very smooth, suave and sophisticated, but he didn't have the right arguments. Farage won because he has got the right arguments.
I think it was a chance for Farage to show that he could compete against someone, because Clegg was everyone's hot favourite. He did really well last election. He's supposed to be very good at this stuff, and everyone's thinking, is Farage going to be a bit too casual and not really live with him? And he did, and that's what I think the big surprise from this for Farage. I think he'll get challenged on his figures. He looks shaky on his figures, which probably some listeners and viewers don't care about. But generally speaking, he lived with Clegg, and that'll be great for him going onwards, I think.
What does the sketch writer think?
I think in a way they both won. Farage gets publicity, which he lives for. Clegg, he may not have won any new voters, and he may have lost his poll, but he's possibly regained some old, disillusioned Lib Dem voters just because he's, taken the fight to someone they utterly hate.
What did your poll say?
It gave 56 to 36, so it's a big win to Farage. And I think all around here, the media
Talking numbers
people,
without explaining that.
56% gave it to Farage, and 37%, I think, gave it to Clegg. And people around here in the media room were very much heading towards Clegg. The great liberal elite of the Westminster media were slowly inching towards giving it to Clegg. And everyone was a bit startled, I think, when the poll came in.
This will put the pressure now on the Prime Minister when we have the debates, if we have the debates next year for the general election, to allow Farage on the platform. There will be a lot of outcry, a big outcry actually, if he's not in there. I don't think he will be, because he's not a potential Prime Minister, but the pressure's on, and Cameron won't thank LBC and Sky for this one little bit.
No, I think Cameron and Miliband have too much to lose from Farage being there. I don't think either of them will want him on, and if Farage is there, then they're not.
What do you think?
I think is there any chance that Cameron and Miliband get together and say, well, neither one of us is going to agree to these debates and let's forget about it entirely? Because I think it's all downside for them. There's no real shot at them convincing other people. Everyone sees too much of these people already. Is there any chance everyone sits down and goes, let's not bother with it this year?
Thatcher had a word. She would have called them Frit, which was Lincolnshire for frightened, and that's what we'll say. If Cameron and Miliband don't go ahead with those debates next year, there'll be a hell of a row. They're now part of the national fabric, and so they should be.
Maybe they're actually slightly better off, or less. It's maybe worse for them to be humiliated by Farage rather than, come across as Frit, as you call it.
But surely we have to continue with the leaders' debates now we've had them. I mean, look, we just looked at the United States. They've had them for donkeys.
Well, someone was just telling me that they thought if Farage kind of keeps obtruding himself on it, Cameron's advisor must say, he's just obtruding himself.
You said that.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah. You used obstreperous at the weekend on the radio.
Yeah, we do, yeah. We're very interested in how much Farage obtrudes himself all over the place.
I'm sure.
But if he
and on whom he obtrudes.
Exactly. But if he does obtrude himself, there's an argument that there's not much in it for Cameron and Miliband.
OK, I'll let you no longer obtrude on what I have to say, and I'm going to leave you to it, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. So, that's it. That is the first Europe debate done. Who did you think won tonight? So was it Mr. Clegg or was it Mr. Farage? Certainly Mr. Farage was a little bit nervous to start with, wasn't he? But Mr. Clegg seemed to have all the figures to hand, perhaps too much, and slightly bombarded us with that. News@sky.com, 84501. Tweet me directly if you would like to, @KBurley. Don't forget, of course, there is another debate at this time next week, and that is being hosted by the BBC. We will be endeavouring to show that to you as well here on Sky News, because we have an open view when it comes to debate. We'd very much like to see the leaders' debate in 2015 as well. Thank you for joining us here on Sky. Bye-bye for now.